was a really interesting idea for a movie. A detective story with a irascible rabbit named Roger. And it just I said, this is a movie that I'd like to go out and see, but this is a movie that we're not going to exactly see overnight. This is going to take years to make. This is not going to be inexpensive. It's going to take a long time. But if done right, it could be, I don't want to say breakthrough, because but it could be something that no one's ever seen before. You know, I and a lot of my generation have been influenced profoundly by the films of Walt Disney, especially the films from the 30s, 40s, and right through the 50s. And I really feel that this is a movie that we're making for Walt.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Downtown Toontown. My name is Justin, and this is episode 9. And today, we're going to sort of buck the usual format of the show, because today I actually have a very special guest slash co-host. He is the writer for laughingplace.com, one of the most popular websites, unofficial websites that covers all things and Disney and much more. He's also the host of a very popular Star Wars podcast called WhosTheBossk Podcast. Please say hello to host Mike Celestino. Mike, how are you?
Hello, Justin. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm super excited to be here, and I'm really glad that you invited me. So thank you for that.
Oh, no problem. I'm very glad you can make it. I mean, you probably don't really know much about my show, but I actually mentioned on episode 1 that your show was actually sort of an influence on my show. Oh. So in a way, I could say you're to blame about me getting into podcasting.
That is an amazing thing to hear. I have not heard that before. So
well,
I will say that I'm honored.
I don't want to repeat too much about that show, but basically, I had the idea last year to go over every Lucasfilm production, but I decided not to go in that direction because you already had a show that covered that.
That's funny that you say that, because I was really thinking about also doing a Spielberg retrospective, and I was like, is there a way that I could work that into Who's the Boss? And I decided not to, because it is focused on Lucasfilm. But as you know, we have done the Indiana Jones movies, and I found an excuse to do Jaws on the 4th of July this year. That's really all the Spielberg that we've dipped into. But for that reason, you know, I'm also really excited that you came up with the same idea and invited me to participate, because it allowed me to explore that avenue without having to force it into Who's the Boss.
Well, yeah, I mean, I actually thought about doing my whole show about maybe, since Lucasfilm was kind of out, maybe I would do all the Spielberg films. Of course, I did some digging, and, there's quite a lot of discussion of Steven Spielberg on the internet and on podcasts. He's only the most famous director who ever lived, after all. But I don't think there's a lot of discussion about his entire resume in just one episode, one or two, so I think this is setting new, that we're getting into new territory here.
Let's do it. I'm genuinely excited to talk about this.
Okay, but yeah, for the listeners out there, as you could guess, this is our episode dedicated to Steven Spielberg. As we mentioned, he's, last year, his first film actually celebrated his 50th anniversary along with Lucasfilm. They both sort of came in together. Last year, he actually celebrated his 75th birthday. Today, as we're recording this, is actually the last day he's celebrating he's 75. Tomorrow will be his 76th birthday.
Happy birthday to Steven Spielberg.
Yes, happy birthday. And he's also very active. He's got a new movie out called The Fabelmans, which it follows a boy who's not named Steven. It follows a family not named Spielberg. But by all intents and purposes, it's about Steven Spielberg. It's about his life. It's about sort of his upbringing. It's about, how little Steve, would get bit by the film bug, as we say, and, how he would grow up to be the legend that we know and love today. So really, this is the opportune time to sort of talk about Steven Spielberg. Now, to clarify the structure about this show in particular, we're going to try to go over his resume, but we're going to focus on the now 34 feature films he's made as a director. We'll mention a few of the films he's produced, maybe talk a little bit about them, but seeing that his IMDb lists approximately 183 films as producer, we're gonna leave some stuff off because that's just too much to talk for one episode. So if you're listening to this a huge fan of the show ER, sorry, we're not going to be talking about ER. We're not going to be talking about Steven Spielberg's The Director's Chair, that CD-ROM game he made in the 90s.
What about Tiny Toon Adventures?
We might mention Tiny Toon Adventures because this is sort of the Roger Rabbit show, and we want to go over his influence on animation a little bit.
Okay.
Not going to be discussing On the Lot, the reality show. We don't even really have to discuss Michael Bay's Transformers series. I hope you're not a fan of that.
I can't say that I am. I saw the first two, and that was enough for me.
Okay, so there you go, folks. We discussed Michael Bay's Transformers film, which Steven Spielberg's executive produced. But so yeah, that's sort of where we're gonna go. But yes, we're gonna be talking about when we saw the film, our impressions of it, and maybe a specific memory that really stands out, because I know, Mike and I do too, of like have specific memories for certain films. We'll try to discuss all of them equally, but yes, inevitably some films will get talked about more than others. So, and with that out of the way, I guess we will start from the beginning. He was born December 18th, 1946. As depicted in his latest film, The Fabelmans, the first film Steven Spielberg ever saw was The Greatest Show on Earth, which was released in 1952. He was mesmerized by the train crash scene in particular, so much so that he actually went to his house and got his little train set and started crashing him after his father warned him not to crash his trains anymore, otherwise he would not fix them. He actually got the idea to get his 8mm camera, crash the trains just one more time, but do it from an angle so that the wreck wouldn't be too big. And then he filmed it and then recorded it, and then he got to watch the train crash over and over and over again without continuing to damaging the trains. And a legend was born. Steven Spielberg became Steven Spielberg, a filmmaker in the making. You could say he was a bit of a child prodigy. He would make films throughout his high school years, including Escape to Nowhere, which was a war film, The Last Gun, which was a Western, both of which are depicted in The Fabelmans. He also directed Fireflight, a movie that isn't depicted in The Fabelmans, but it was about an alien invading a small town. So you could see very early in his career, he was tackling themes and ideas that he would tackle again and again throughout his career. But the first film he ever really, really made that he would say would be the start was when he was a student at CSU Long Beach University in 1968. He directed his first 35mm film. Those films were shot mostly on 8mm. But his first film really starts at Amblin. That was the film that gave him a contract at Universal. There's not a lot of talk about his short films, but I do want to mention, since it would later go on to become the name of his production company. Excuse me. Since it would go on to be the name of his production company, Mike, I know you were a film student. Have you seen Amblin?
Yes, I saw it a long time ago. I don't have too many memories about it, except that I know it's about people walking through the desert, and that's kind of where it gets its title, people kind of ambling along through the desert. I don't remember much about the plot.
And yeah, I mean, I actually only saw it for the first time just now, like in the past month when I knew I was going to be doing this episode. I had seen clips. Unfortunately, it's online. It's not very good quality. I mean, the only copy available seems to be a really bad transfer, but from what I could tell, it's a pretty good film. I enjoyed watching it. I wish we could have had a clearer version of the print because that's literally film history. It's the start of Spielberg, and he would go on to name his entire production company off of it. But yeah, you could kind of tell he's good at directing young people. It's in the desert. His films are always a lot of his films are outside. They're always on the move, and he loves action. I mean, yeah, there's not a lot in terms of plot and structure, but you can definitely see signs that this is a kid with a voice.
Yeah, totally agreed. I think I watched it in film school, like you mentioned. This would have been more than 20 years ago. And I remember thinking the same thing. Like you could really see signs of where he was going from the very beginning.
Yeah, Amblin was what got him the job at Universal Studios. I mean, I know he loves to tell that story about how he jumped off the tram tour and they hired him right on the spot. But well, we don't really have to go into speculation on whether that's true or not. But basically, that gave him the contract at Universal. He directed mostly television work from on. The very first Screen Actors Guild actor he ever directed was Joan Crawford back in Night Gallery. So he's been directing professional actors, since he was just pretty young in his 20s. He directed an episode of Columbo. So he was doing a number of things in TV. Now, believe it or not, it's actually a debate about what the first Steven Spielberg movie actually is. His first theatrical film released in the United States, his home country, our home country, is technically The Sugarland Express. However, the first professional film he really did, it was a TV movie, but he made an extended version, which actually got a theatrical cut in Europe, a theatrical release in Europe. And that's really his first film, and that is Duel, which was released in 1971. And this is really Steven Spielberg's first movie. Most critics and film blogs, film organizations, everything that I've seen, I mean, pretty much everyone includes Duel. Like, even though, yes, it did technically start as a TV movie, this is really the beginning of Steven Spielberg. And have you seen Duel? What were your thoughts on Duel, Mike?
Yeah, I love Duel. So when I was getting into film and Spielberg as a teenager, well, I was already into him, but when I was really getting into him, and I was like, oh, I gotta watch everything. I bought Duel on VHS from Suncoast Motion Picture Company in my local mall, Massapequa Sunrise Mall, Long Island, New York, and brought it home and watched it and loved it. I still have the VHS. I should have dug it up for this recording and to show you. It's the only copy of Duel that I own because I never upgraded it to DVD because the VHS is in the correct aspect ratio. I didn't feel the need. It's 4:3, and it's great. I love that movie. It's basically just a long car chase between a salesman and a big rig truck driver who has a vendetta against him for unknown reasons, really. And it's just an action movie, and there's a lot of great action set pieces, and it's really entertaining. There's not really much of a plot beyond that. It's just a fun watch.
So let me ask you this, since you brought up your VHS tape. Is it the TV movie version, or is it the European version, which got the theatrical release?
That's a great question, and I don't actually know the answer to that. I wish I had. Yeah, but which
version is only an hour long?
This would be the theatrical version because it is feature length. Yeah,
and it has like the bus scene like isn't in the TV version. And
yeah,
there's some mostly small things like that's a big thing. But yeah, I'm a little younger. I did not have Duel on VHS tape. I seen clips I back in 2007, I saw the Spielberg on Spielberg documentary that they played on Turner Classic Movies, which sort of, was an interview with Steven Spielberg, and they talks about his entire resume. So I had seen clips of Duel. So in a sense, they even played the ending. So in a sense, I sort of saw Duel without ever seeing Duel. I only saw it for the first time last year. It was on a class. It was called Classic Reel. It's actually a streaming service that not a lot of people, I'm guessing, know about. If you have Roku, it's basically, yeah, like my mom basically bought, like, she subscribed to it wanting to see some older films that, you don't traditionally see on Netflix and some of the other streaming services. And I was just bored at, her house one day. Like, I was just looking for things to watch. And then, one of the things was like, oh, Duel, I've never actually seen this from beginning to end. Maybe I saw this and I freaking loved it. It's one of the best things I've ever seen. Like you said, not a lot of plot, but it doesn't matter. It's
Right.
just so well made. It's so thrilling. Like, you could, it communicates what it wants to. You get an adrenaline rush watching it. You can even see influence, I think, on things like George Miller and his Mad Max movies a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
how it's just, again, you don't really need a complex plot to really tell a great story and to like get people excited. You just need a good premise and, good skills, which, this has.
Yeah, I agree. Simple and to the point and entertaining, and it works really well. And I also want to mention that even if you haven't seen Duel, you have probably heard part of Duel, because if you've seen Jaws, they recycle the sound effect of the truck going off the cliff at the end of Duel. Spoiler alert, sorry for Duel. But that sound is used as the dying shark noise in Jaws. A little bit of a Easter egg tidbit there.
Cool little tidbit. I think I believe, if I remember correctly, even like an episode of like The Incredible Hulk borrowed it.
Okay.
Like, it was a very popular hit throughout. It's maybe the best television movie ever made. I mean, again, in Europe, I see it as a theatrical film because it's good for Europe. Then, it's a great film to really start off Steven's resume. But yes, he followed that up 3 years later. He did a couple of other TV movies, but inevitably, the first movie that got a theatrical release in the United States was the Sugarland Express, released in 1974. This is a notable film. It was actually the first film he would team up with a composer named John Williams, a relationship that would go on through his entire career. He's still working today. That's big notable. He, the last film he got, he used Dennis Weaver, who was a big TV actor who was mostly known for Gunsmoke. Here, he got a movie star up and rising in the form of Kurt Russell's wife, Goldie Hawn.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this is not traditionally what I would think would be the start of Spielberg. Like, Duel would be more my thing. But Mike,
Right.
What do you think about the Sugarland Express?
Yeah, this is another movie I watched when I was a teenager. I think I was like 16 or 17 when I first saw it. I remember thinking it was just okay. And then I never watched it again until yesterday, which I watched it, I revisited it. I wanted to see it again before we recorded this podcast. And I watched it with an eye out for his style, like how developed his style was by that point, by the very first theatrical movie that he directed. And I could see a lot of what we would come to recognize as Spielbergian style bleeding through in this very early film. A lot of the shot composition, just a lot of the camera movements, and he actually uses I guess what you would call the vertigo effect, which is the camera pushing in and zooming out at the same time, or vice versa, which is also in Jaws when Roy Scheider sees the shark attack in the water. You know what I'm talking about. So I was really paying attention to the technical aspects, but as a movie, I think it's pretty entertaining. It's about Goldie Hawn breaking her husband out of prison. Her husband is played by William Atherton, who you may know from Ghostbusters. He's Walter Peck in Ghostbusters. So good cast. It's a fun movie. It's basically, again, a long car chase because they're being chased by the police basically throughout the entire film, and it's kind of what I would call a dramedy, kind of a mashup between, well, I didn't invent that term has been around for a long time, but yeah, it's got some drama elements. They're trying to get to Sugarland, Texas to find their child who's been adopted, and it's also got a lot of comedy elements, and I think it works fairly well. And yeah, you can see the spark of genius in there somewhere, although he doesn't hit perfection until the next outing.
Yeah, it's not as exciting. I mean, it's an interesting watch. It I actually prefer a film that came out a year earlier that's kind of a similar thing called Badlands, which
Okay.
is also based on sort of a true life crime scenario. But yeah, I mean, it's a interesting watch. I mean, if you're not a huge Spielberg fan, I'm not sure I'd recommend it to the average person, but it's worth watching. It's got some cool little shots. It's an interesting film.
Yeah, agreed.
And then, of course, he followed it up with a very small little film called Jaws. But yes, Jaws is often credited as the film that started the blockbuster that started. I mean, there were blockbusters before Jaws, but never Jaws really cemented it. It was released during the summer, which, believe it or not, was a time that was considered a dead movie time. Studios, for some reason, just figured that kids are at the beach, they're not going to want to watch a movie. Jaws sort of was released then, became a huge hit, which as a result, even to this day in 2022, films that are released in the summer are often the big budget tentpole films, and that sort of started with Jaws because it was based on a Robert Benchley book. I believe that's his name, Robert Benchley.
Peter Benchley.
Peter Benchley. I'm sorry.
That's
yeah,
okay.
Peter Benchley. It was a legendary production. It went over 100 days over budget. It went 100 days over schedule. It was over budget. I mean, a lot of studios were like, this young Steven Spielberg will never work in this town again, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it had a much talked about, discussed, and it became the highest grossing movie at that point. So, I mean, I think you've mentioned Jaws quite a few times talking about the other two films, but
yeah,
talk about your odyssey with Jaws, Mike.
Yeah, well, I call Jaws my favorite movie ever made, so I could gush about it for a long time. I have, in fact, like I mentioned, we did an episode on Who's the Boss dedicated to Jaws this past summer with my friend David, and I just love everything about it. I'll never get tired of it. I can rewatch it over and over again, and it makes me cry, like how much I love it, and I discover new things about it every time. I love the characters, especially. I mean, it's hard to actually choose a favorite, but my favorite would be Quint. Just thinking about it after 40 years of living with the film. Quint, played by Robert Shaw, probably my favorite character in all of moviedom. And then also, Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss, and Chief Brody, played by Roy Scheider. They're all great. Got this triptych of characters who all hang out together throughout the second half of the film. And it's one of those movies, I always talk about, I bring this up a lot on my podcast, how I like when a movie starts off one way and goes, it becomes a different movie by the second half. And Jaws is a perfect example of that, because you've got the first half takes place on the mainland, and then the second half is all out on the ocean. So I really love that about it. And then, yeah, it's magical to me. And it's got this mythic quality of man versus nature. And it's about a shark, but it's also about so much more. And I think it became so relevant in recent years with the COVID-19 pandemic. I think more people than me, drew parallels between the events of Jaws and what happened with the pandemic and everything. So it's a very prescient film. It's about humanity. It's about the way we deal with each other as well. I think there's just so much to it and so much to love about it. And yeah, like I said, I'll never tire of that film. I love it so much.
Yeah, that mayor character, he turned out to be the most realistic one in the film.
Yes,
But
yes.
do you remember the first time you ever saw Jaws?
Yeah, my grandfather.
I
Yeah.
take it you're too young to have like had the experience. I don't know if you saw the Summer of the Shark thing that's on like Netflix, but I take it you weren't there in 1975.
No,
You didn't have that sort of experience.
I was born in 79, so I missed out on that. I wouldn't have seen it until I actually probably saw it younger than I should have. I think this is one of those movies my grandfather probably showed me because he was into movies. You know, he showed me 2001: A Space Odyssey, I think when I was like 8, which is like, it went way over my head. And again, it's become one of my favorites since then. But Jaws, yeah, I probably saw it when I was like 6 or 7 or something. And I liked it then, but it became my favorite later on again. And my grandfather was big into fishing and big into the ocean, so I think that movie in particular spoke to him, and it kind of transferred over to me. His passion for it and love for that film became my own.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is rated PG. I mean, you mentioned how intense it is, so I'm sure a lot of kids, like in a way, this was their first horror film. This was the
Yes.
first film that really, scared them and scarred them from ever wanting to go to the beach in their lives.
It's interesting that you mentioned that it's a horror film, because I feel like people forget to list Jaws when they list off their favorite horror movies. I feel like people go to like a slasher movie, Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, before they remembered that Jaws is a horror movie. And I think War of the Worlds might count, but Spielberg hasn't really made any other movie. I guess Poltergeist. I don't know if we're going to talk about that as whether or not Spielberg actually directed that or what. But as far as horror goes, yeah, when people say what's your favorite horror movie, I always say Jaws as well, because I do think it is a horror movie. I don't know what else you would classify. It is action adventure kind of too, but yeah, people tend to forget that it's a horror film.
Yeah, it's in that line, horror, suspense, thriller, you could get all technical of that, but it's sort of all those things. I love films that sort of defy genres, that they're not necessarily one thing. And that's a big appeal, I think, of Steven Spielberg, is that, a lot of his films, like even, some of his darker ones, there's always a little bit of comedy in here. There's always, he tries to get you through that whole human experience, which gives you a very fulfilling film, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably turn this into the Jaws show, but I will say my only real memory I want to add is actually happened this year. I got to see it on the big screen at IMAX, nice. So that was a fun thing to finally see Jaws. I didn't care for the moment in the theater where the alarm went off for a few seconds.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was only during the very quiet moment where he's making facial things with his son. So it's sort of kind of ruined the moment.
Yeah.
But which is supposed to be a soft, quiet little moment. But
I'll mention that I had the honor of getting to project Jaws, getting to run Jaws, a reel-to-reel 35 millimeter film, when I worked as a film projectionist at ArcLight Hollywood. We had a revival screening of Jaws, and that was so cool. It was just great to be able to, get the reels, inspect them, thread them up on the projector, and just get to watch it from that perspective as a projectionist.
Did you really see it in 3D?
I have not seen it in 3D. No, I missed out on that.
Yeah, I missed out on that too. So listeners, if you've seen it in 3D, contact us and let us know what you thought. But anyways, that was a huge hit. So the question is, how do you top that? How do you follow that up? Well, Steven, he decided, I mentioned Fireflight, which was his sort of first venture into aliens and sci-fi. So he followed that, Jaws with a space movie, but it's sort of a little more than that. It's also, in a way, you could say this is sort of his first attempt at a biographical film. It's basically about a family man. It stars Richard Dreyfuss, who was also in Jaws. I don't know if we mentioned his name yet, but
Mhm.
yeah, Spielberg really, he actually once called Richard Dreyfuss his alter ego. So in a way, you could see, yeah, maybe it's a little like him, but also a little like his father, what should say. It's about sort of an estranged marriage, but it's mostly about first contact with, with a mysterious force, we should say. I mean, it's technically a spoiler alert to even say anything more than that, but if this is a very successful film, a very iconic film, so chances are you know what it's about. I mean, it put Devil's Tower in Wyoming on the map. It's one of the most, Wyoming doesn't have a whole lot, but you could always say, well, it has Devil's Tower. So what do you think of Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
This is another one that I really, really love. If I had to list my top 10 Spielberg films, this would probably be in the top 5, I think. And we have made a pilgrimage to Devil's Tower in Wyoming, probably just because of this movie. I don't, like you said, I don't think I would even know that it existed if not for Close Encounters. There's also that great moment. You've seen UHF, the Weird Al Yankovic film, right?
Yeah.
That great moment, the parody where he's digging in the mashed potatoes. This means something. Comes right from Close Encounters, which some people don't know that connection. But love Close Encounters. Really it sends chills up my spine, especially the first half of this movie. I would say I really love the setup and the initial encounters with the aliens. That first time he's driving, when Richard Dreyfuss's character is driving his truck and the UFO comes up behind him, and then gravity kind of turns upside down, and the street signs and the traffic lights and the railroad crossing goes nuts and stuff. Boy, all that stuff is really wonderful. I got to see this in the theater not recently, but within the last decade. I saw it again at ArcLight Hollywood when I was working there. I wasn't projecting it, but I got to sit in the theater and watch it, and it was really a fantastic, really moving experience. And yeah, I love everything. I love the characters. I love, the other thing I want to mention about Close Encounters is the authenticity of the chaos of a suburban American family home, which I think really comes across in this movie. In the early scenes, again, I love that scene in the beginning where they're trying to plan what they want to do to go to Goofy Golf or go to see you know what I'm talking about.
He wants to see Pinocchio.
He wants to see Pinocchio, and just the chaos of the kids like running around screaming and playing in the background. Like, it feels like such controlled chaos. And that to me is Spielberg nailing suburban American life before the aliens show up, and shake that all up. But yeah, I love this film.
Yeah, it's absolutely a classic. They actually re-released it 5 years ago for the 40th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
I did not quite get to see it in theaters, unfortunately. But one of my favorite memories is I got the book, the Close Encounters visual guide book,
Nice.
which they was selling. I got it signed by not only the author, Michael Klastorian, who also wrote the Back to the Future book, but what I was really excited by was that both Douglas Trumbull and oh gosh, I can't believe I'm blanking his name, Star Wars guy who also worked on, I want to say it's Dennis Muren was there.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
And I got that book signed, and yeah, I was just so excited to geek out over two big special effects guys. I had to tell the late Douglas Trumbull that I love everything that you've done, and he said, I love every movie you did. He said, thank you.
I have another good tidbit about Close Encounters, actually, that I just remembered. So, the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. There's the main Air and Space Museum on the mall in DC, but then there's like an ancillary Air and Space Museum that's in like Virginia or something. And I was visiting my wife's family, and we all went to that museum, not the main one, but the secondary Air and Space Museum. And they have there in that museum in Virginia, which I had never heard of, but we got to see it. It was a very cool museum, but they have there the mothership from Close Encounters, the actual model. is there. And I spent most of my time at that museum just gawking at this gorgeous, intricately detailed model. And you probably know the Easter egg that's on that. Well, there's a few Easter eggs, but one of them is R2D2 is upside down, hanging from one of the little ledges. And it's just a huge, gorgeous ship. And for whatever reason, it's in this kind of random museum in Air and Space Museum in Virginia. I just thought this is the last place I expected to see this, but I don't know why it ended up there, but it was very cool to see it in person.
Yeah, so you spent like an hour or so doing the Spielberg stare.
Exactly. It wasn't above me though. Yeah, that it was yeah. But yeah, I did.
But yeah, so he follows two huge hits. So how do you follow that up? Well, he followed it up with a big film, we should say. It was 1941, released in 1979. I've seen this film. I actually saw it in about 2014. I was like, well, yeah, I've heard bad things about it. It's sort of legendary as being Spielberg's flop, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to see it in an opening line because, I actually have liked films that were flops that people have trashed. I'm the guy who loves Howard the Duck and defends that. I mean, I even have the Star Wars holiday special sweater, so I have all the Life Day stuff. So I was more than willing to give 1941 a chance, but the critics aren't always wrong. Sometimes they are right. And in this particular case, I didn't particularly care for the film. I even gave it a second chance the following year. I saw it at the Egyptian Theater.
Okay.
I've seen it twice now, and I saw it with a Q&A with like Tim Matheson was there, Nancy Allen was there, Bob Gale was there. I was hoping maybe this time I will finally get to enjoy this film and see what Spielberg intended with this big budget comedy. Like I think it's like his attempt at doing his version of It's a Mad, 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 Mad World combined with his attempt at Doctor Strangelove. So it's sort of satire / big spoof comedy. But I think this is a misfire on Spielberg's part. I can see why it bombed. Are you a defender of it, Mike?
I'm not. So this is another one that I watched as a teenager when I was going through his whole filmography up to that point. And I think I've only ever seen it that one time. It really fell flat for me, even though I'm a fan of everyone in the cast, John Belushi, geez. And yeah, everybody else is in there. It's a real mystery why it didn't work. I think somebody could probably write a book about why 1941 is a failure because you have so much talent. But this has happened many times in film history where for all, you have every reason why a movie should be successful and then it just doesn't click, and I think 1941 is a great example of that. For some reason, I think maybe Spielberg isn't great at straight, all out comedy. He has comedy in all of his movies. There's definitely funny moments, and he has a good sense of what's funny because even in Jaws, there's laugh out loud moments. Even in movies that aren't
kind of thing.
Exactly, but when he dives headfirst into comedy in the case of 1941, it just didn't work, and I think he's kind of steered in the other direction after that.
Yeah, and also just I guess the subject matter. I know 79, I guess there were more, the World War II generation was still around, so there was maybe a sense of nostalgia going on, but I don't know, it just mostly falls flat for me.
Yeah.
But I will say this though, people will say of film characters, oh, I've been seen, or they represent that general who's just all he wants to do is watch Dumbo. Best thing in the film, yes, I've never served in the military, but if I did, I would be that general. I just want to stay home. If the world's collapsing, I would be happy to just stay home and watch Disney movies. So
there you go. You just gotta hope the power stays on, I guess.
Yeah, that general. So he's awesome. The rest of the 1941, it's a miss.
Yeah, agreed on that count.
But yeah, then we're getting to, I guess this is when your boy George Lucas comes into the equation because because Jaws and Close Encounters were huge hits, but because they were so expensive and over budget, studios were sort of reluctant to really work with Spielberg, and because of how expensive they were. And then once he did 1941 and it was a huge flop, that just gave a lot of people excuse to say, yeah, let's not work with Steven Spielberg ever again. Because if you notice, Jaws was a Universal film. Close Encounters was a Sony film, a Columbia Pictures film. And then after that, with 1941 was also a Columbia film. But after that, none of the studios wanted. So it came up to George, who actually came to the rescue, because he did a little film called Star Wars, which he had money to burn, and he wanted to do his other idea. I mean, well, we've all heard the story about George and Steven building sandcastles on a beach in Hawaii. Spielberg wants to make a James Bond film, but he's not British, so there's no way the people who own Bond want to work with him. George is like, well, I can beat James Bond. And Spielberg's like, what do you mean? I have this idea for a cool, a little adventure series. It's based on the Saturday matinee serials. It's about an action adventure archaeologist. He goes through action adventure, but there's also supernatural. It's called Indiana Smith. And then, of course, Spielberg said, well, I don't like the name, and then they changed it to Indiana Jones. But yes, this was, George came to the rescue. He fought for Steven. They went to Paramount Pictures this time, and that was the start of Raiders of the Lost Ark. So, Mike, I know you've done a whole episode on Raiders. But let me ask you this. Do you see Raiders of the Lost Ark and really Indiana Jones as a Steven Spielberg movie or a George Lucas movie?
Okay, I have a couple things I want to address in your intro here, if that's okay. So you called George Lucas my boy, which I thought was very funny.
It's just because you did Who's the Boss, right? And so you the film. You probably have bashed the prequels in the past. I know you don't like Attack of the Clones. I'm just
I wanted to say, like, Star Wars is my favorite franchise. Pop culture franchise for sure, but as a film fan, I'm a much bigger Spielberg fan than a George Lucas fan. If I listed my top like 25 favorite films, a bunch of them would be Spielberg movies for sure.
Yeah, well, Spielberg has made more movies, but...
right. But I think, like, on a filmmaking level, I just think he's head and shoulders above George Lucas. Like, George Lucas has directed, I think, 2 great movies. Yeah, so I think Spielberg just wins by a long shot in my book.
And I think why Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's my favorite Spielberg film, even though you could argue, George Lucas was sort of more, he came up with the idea and the concept and all that. But I think why it's so good is because everybody was in the right place at the right time. Spielberg, Lucas was a great producer. That's the way I see it. And with Spielberg directing, Lawrence Kasdan writing the script, all of, Spielberg had Michael Kahn. Of course, they brought back John Williams and, Harrison Ford, who almost didn't get the role. We almost got Tom Selleck, but you have everybody coming together. It was a lightning in a bottle. I mean, you could say that about Jaws and Close Encounters too, but in Raiders in particular, is everyone was at the right place and the right time. And structurally, I think Raiders is pretty much a perfect movie. I can't help but notice we're doing a Zoom call. I know the podcast can't see this, but you've got the staff of Raw medallion on top.
I've got the staff of Raw headpiece of the staff of Raw is behind me. I've got also the fertility idol is right here. I don't know if you can see that.
I have a whole shelf, but you can't really see it from here. But that's besides the point. I mean, you love this film, right, Mike?
I do. And the other like footnote I want to put in here, based on what you were saying earlier, and I found this out recently when I read Brian J. Jones's biography of George Lucas, but it was Michael Eisner who greenlit this film at Paramount. I did not know that until last year, which is crazy. And then that's why when Michael Eisner went to Disney, we got these Disney attractions these Indiana Jones attractions at Disneyland. You got the Indiana Jones Adventure at Disneyland and the Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular down there at Walt Disney World. Anyway, that's besides the point. Raiders of the Lost Ark, another one that's in my top 5. It might be like my third favorite movie ever made or something like that. It's definitely up there. And again, love everything about it. Created one of the most iconic movie characters ever in Indiana Jones. I don't know. What do you say about Raiders that hasn't been said before? But
you could listen to your podcast on Who's the Boss.
Yeah, I did an episode about this too with Bill Gausel from Laughing Place, and we talked about it at great length. But yeah, just this combination of, like you mentioned, a pulpy serial type adventure with real world set against the real world war back. The World War II is about to break out. It's the late 1930s. And you've got the paranormal element there as well. And it's just, I think, like Star Wars, it is the idea of taking these serials that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg grew up watching and transforming them into something that was actually good. Because if you go back and watch those serials, they're not terribly entertaining or well made, but in their head,
in their defense, it's not like they had a ton of budget or
right. But they made Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark to be what they saw in their head when they were watching those serials, the Flash Gordon and whatever else, transformed into these movies. So they took what they saw in their head as a kid and put it up on the big screen for us to see. And I think it just works so incredibly well. And, time has proven that correct, because we're still getting more Star Wars and Indiana Jones in theaters. It'll never end because of how impactful it was, both of them as franchises.
Well, I probably talked about Raiders, or really Indiana Jones, as much as Roger Rabbit on this podcast, so I won't go on too much. I mean, favorite memory, like I can't even remember a time when Indiana Jones wasn't a part. I mean, sort of, but yeah, I mean, I could say the Disneyland attraction's one of the best they've ever done. As far as screenings go, I just remember during the pandemic lockdown in 2020, in theory, I should have been using that time to see movies I haven't seen before. Like, I don't know, see Ingmar Bergman's filmography. But I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark 3 times in 2020 alone. And in this year, I saw it in 4D, have 4DD, which was not really in 3D, but basically the seats move. Did you get to do that?
I've never done that. No, I can't say that I'm really a fan of all the bells and whistles. I'm really kind of a movie purist. Like, I don't even like people in LA love going to like the cemetery screenings and outdoor and I'm a curmudgeon. I'm a snob when it comes to that kind of stuff, because I'm like, we have so many great movie theaters in LA. Why wouldn't we just go and watch a movie in a movie theater? I think it's more about the socializing with other people and stuff. But I don't love 3D, even when something gets a 3D conversion, like you said, like Jaws.
Yeah.
To me, a movie like Jaws or Raiders of the Lost Ark are 3D in and of themselves without needing the glasses. Like I think when Hitchcock saw Jaws, I mentioned this on Who's the Boss, but there's a quote from Alfred Hitchcock when he saw Jaws, and he said that Spielberg was the first filmmaker to break the proscenium. And I love that quote because it's so true. But you can feel the movie coming out of the screen at you without needing 3D glasses. And yeah, the moving seat thing, to me, it just doesn't do it for me as a film purist. I just want to sit there and get lost in the image and sound, and that's enough for me, I think.
I hear you, but as someone who's seen Raiders of the Lost Ark countless times, this was just a fun way to experience it.
Okay.
And I will say that, like, I loved like the water splat when feeling the Nazi blood splatter all.
I didn't know that part. That's hilarious.
Yeah,
was it warm? Was it cold water or warm water?
It was just like regular water, like a little mist, but
like room temperature.
Yeah.
So the other thing I want to say about Raiders is, like, people always ask, oh, what's the best action scene or the best chase scene ever filmed? And my vote really goes for the truck chase in Raiders. Just beat for beat, I could watch that scene on a loop. You could just put that on in front of me in a loop, and I would never lose interest. Just I think it can, you can study that scene as a master class in action movie filmmaking because it's so clear where everybody is at every moment. You can follow the action perfectly, and it's so exciting, keeps you on the edge of your seat. What a beautiful, perfectly executed action scene.
Yeah. I'm a champion of the opening, fertility idol scene myself.
Sure.
I mean, all the iconic things you think of if Indiana Jones are introduced in that one particular like 15-20 minute, intro. It's just fantastic. Seen it many times. I got to go on the Disneyland ride before the movie. So when I saw the movie, I was like, oh, this is where, although already away, I was into Indiana Jones. We could probably go on and on, but
Yeah, we definitely could. But there's a
they
lot more
followed
movies
that
to
up
get through.
with E.T., which
Yeah.
is a very classic film. It was the highest grossing film of 1982. I mean, you'll see that again and again as Spielberg. Generally, Jaws was the highest grossing movie ever made. Raiders was the highest grossing movie in 1981. And then he followed that up with E.T., which was the highest grossing film of 1982. It was a a very small film, classic. About a boy, without his father because the parents are going through a divorce, and he befriends this mysterious creature, and it was a story that just, as the poster said, it touched the world. It's been re-released many, many times. One of the most famous films that's never had a sequel, that's never been serialized because, Spielberg, I think it really means something to Spielberg. This is before The Fablemans. This is probably like the closest film to his childhood, I would
Mm.
say. And yeah, I mean, it's very simple, but it's sappy, but you know what? It works. I mean, what do you think, Mike?
So Raiders was the first Spielberg movie to come out while I was alive, but I think E.T. might have been the first movie I ever saw in the theater. I was 2 years old, and my mom was a big movie fan. I think she dragged me to see this, even though I don't remember because I was too young. The first movie I remember seeing was Ghostbusters, but I think I saw E.T. in the theater, I'm pretty sure. And I grew up with this movie. I'm a child. I was born in December of 1979. So I lived throughout the 80s. I saw that whole decade, very much a child of the 80s. And this movie is very close to my heart for that reason. Rewatched it again with my mom recently and it's a very emotional film. Like you mentioned, it's kind of sappy, but it does tug at the heartstrings. And I think it works for those reasons. It has a lot of what you would call Spielbergian moments and characters, and it's just super memorable. Like you said, it's an iconic movie without ever having a sequel. The closest we ever got was a theme park attraction that we had here in Southern California, and then
It's still in Florida.
still in Orlando, Florida.
I
You
will
can still
never
go ride
forgive
it.
Universal for taking that ET ride out and replacing it with
Oh,
a
I know.
copycat of another ride based on a Spielberg film in that other park.
Yeah, I miss that ET. There's an argument to be made about leaving legacy attractions, I think, in theme parks. Boy, that would be great if we still had that ET ride. But the movie, I think it holds up really well. It works on a lot of different levels. I would recommend it to families with young kids, even to this day. Maybe 6 to 10-year-olds would really get a kick out of it, and I still really enjoy watching it. It's not one of my favorite all-time movies as an adult, but I think it really works as a family film.
I pretty much agree. I mean, I think E.T. was the first Spielberg film. It's sort of, I'm a little younger, but, E.T. has just always been there. We've had the VHS tape. Fun little fact, my mom actually went to high school with Melissa Matheson, who was the
Okay.
screenwriter of E.T. and for 20 years was Mrs. Harrison Ford. So every time E.T. brought up, she was like, brag, oh, I got to go with I knew her before she became famous.
And Harrison Ford famously had a deleted scene where he played the principal, I believe, in E.T.
Absolutely right. I believe it's on the Laserdisc. I know they released it that, but yeah, you can see that on YouTube.
Mhm.
If he was in that, if they had restored it, he would have been in pretty much every highest grossing movie at that particular moment in time. Like, Harrison Ford was just everywhere. And yeah, and like Jaws, I also saw this recently on the big screen. I missed out the 2002 re-release, which
Yeah.
they added all those scenes. I missed out on that, but I did see it on IMAX, and it was great to see E.T. again.
Well, let's talk about that for a second because we had the Star Wars special editions in the late 90s, and then Spielberg followed through and did kind of the same thing with ET in 2002. And then later he had a change of heart and he kind of said wished he hadn't done that, because if you watch that 2002 version of the film, those scenes with the CGI ET, they just stick out like a sore thumb. They don't match anything else in the movie. And that's very much true to me about the Star Wars special editions. So, what do you think the difference is between Spielberg and Lucas in this situation? Because Lucas has never changed his mind about. In fact, he kept adding and changing things in Star Wars, and Spielberg is now of the mind where, oh, we should have access to the original theatrical version of the film.
My version of that was always just, as long as you have a version of every single release on home video, it doesn't matter. Let people what they want.
Right.
Always preserve the original. But
Yeah.
yeah, and then you can add more scenes, do whatever you want. I mean, just follow Ridley Scott with Blade Runner. I mean, it's not that hard. Spielberg said, he's a people pleaser, let's just say. So when all that backlash got, it's like, well, release all the versions. But,
Yeah.
it's like, obviously Spielberg's approach was better than George, which he he only released the original versions on DVD as like a bonus feature, and it was the Laserdisc transfer. But we can go. We're not here to talk about Star Wars. The moment, yeah, I think those scenes, they were a fun little bonus to see. But yeah, I prefer, obviously the original version is the go-to version for
Yeah.
that for ET. And yeah, and that was, of course, a very big year, for Spielberg, of course, again, highest grossing movie of the year. You did mention Poltergeist, which it's technically that was directed by Tom Hopper, who did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, among other things.
Mhm.
It's a bit of a debate if he actually there is speculation out there that Spielberg did some ghost directing, we should say. He did some AD work, I know, on that. Some people like to sort of include it as the unofficial Spielberg directed film.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you have thoughts on Poltergeist, you could go over them now.
Oh, I'll just say that it's I love Poltergeist. I think it's really entertaining, really fun, really funny, and scary. Great horror comedy. And yeah, whether or not Spielberg ghost directed it, like you said, it's a wonderful film.
Yeah, I
That's enough.
mean,
Yeah.
I think the problem with that film was I just saw it past a certain age. If you don't see it at that right age, I think the magic doesn't quite work as much. At least with Poltergeist in the case, because
Yeah, I have another thing I want to add on to that, kind of a tangent to what you just said. Another movie that Spielberg directed parts of, let's say, is The Goonies, and that's another movie where like I adore the film, and anyone who saw it again past age like 10, they're like, what? I don't understand why anyone likes this movie. So very true for that movie as well.
yeah, I am a big fan of the Goonies. The first time I ever saw that was I actually saw they played it in third grade and they showed the TV cut, which included the deleted scenes.
Yeah.
So I remember like seeing it on TV and then seeing the DVD. I was like, where's the octopus scene? I found it on the deleted scenes. But yeah, I actually think the film doesn't work as well without those scenes. Like I've never been able to top the Goonies, that one great screening of the Goonies. Like that was an amazing film. I still enjoy the film a lot too, but it captures, again, Spielberg is great at capturing sort of that childlike view of the world perfectly. I love those casts, and yeah, it's a good movie, but I think that's one I would like to see. Talking about versions, is the Goonies with those deleted scenes. And
Yeah, extended cut of the Goonies. I'm surprised
yeah,
they haven't done that.
yeah, they absolutely should. But anyway, after Poltergeist, after ET, he didn't really release any film in 1983, except he did, I guess, a segment in Twilight Zone, the movie, a controversial film for reasons we don't really need to go into for an episode. But yeah, that
Okay.
was sort of just a footnote. But in 1984, he did a sequel to a movie we discussed, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which you have discussed on your show. All I'll say is I actually saw Temple of Doom before Raiders of the Lost Ark. So this
How
was
appropriate, because it takes place before Raiders of the Lost
yeah,
Ark.
this is actually my introduction to Indiana Jones, and I loved it, and I was completely terrified of it, and that might be a reason why I loved it. As a when I was like a teen, when my dad was like, oh, that's my least favorite one, and then I saw the behind the scenes, and Steven Spielberg himself said it was my least favorite of the Indiana Jones movies. I sort of just echoed their sentiments. Well, if my dad and the director Steven Spielberg say it's the weakest, I guess it's the weakest too. That I just sort of agreed with the conventional wisdom. It's only now when I've gotten older, the older I got, especially starting when the fourth movie came out and watching all the movies again, I actually really come to like and appreciate Temple of Doom. You don't really see a lot of sequels like this. Spielberg doesn't do a lot of sequels in general, but like so many sequels just copy the structure of the original film.
Yeah.
Raiders has none of the characters. It takes place in totally different locations. It doesn't even follow the same genre of Raiders. Raiders is more action adventure. Temple of Doom goes for more pulp and horror. It really sort of doubles down on that. And I kind of love it. Like, I'm not someone who says Temple of Doom is better for Raiders. Like, Temple of Doom is uneven. It's not perfect, but Raiders is such a perfectly structured film. I have to rank it above Temple of Doom. But I respect Temple of Doom, and I can see why there are people out there like Tarantino who champion it and say it's like the best film Spielberg's done. And like, I really have come around that film. As I've matured, like, what is you've already went over it on your show, but
That's fine. Yeah, I hadn't heard Quentin Tarantino's thoughts on this, but I think you and I are on the same page here, because I am a defender of Temple of Doom. I have had this argument with people a bunch. I can see the flaws, like you said. It is an uneven film. I could definitely see the flaws, but I still love it. And I have defended it as being the movie in the Indiana Jones franchise that I think best represents the spirit of what Indiana Jones is all about. And it's not a perfect movie. Like you said, I think Raiders of the Lost Ark is a better film, but spiritually, as an action adventure, pulpy, serial homage, I think Temple of Doom has that. It's pure in that nature, I guess is what I would say. And I love the characters in this film that are introduced. I love Short Round. I know people hate Kate Capshaw as Willie Scott, but I don't mind her. I think she works in that context, and her character makes sense as she is portrayed in that world. Yeah, she's grating, but she's supposed to be, I think. And there are other complaints to be made about Temple of Doom, but this is another movie that I saw a lot growing up, and I'll never get tired of it. So I really don't have anything too negative to say about it.
yeah, and going back to Spielberg sort of distancing himself, I think it's just because, again, he's a people pleaser. Having four of the all-time biggest hits in a row sort of made him sort of a conformist. So I think the fact Temple of Doom got backlash sort of influence. It's just so weird to see him attack it when it's the film that introduced him to his wife.
Right. And he has said, I think he has said that he and George Lucas were both going through a weird, tough time in their personal lives when they were making Temple of Doom, and that's why it turned out so dark. But yeah, I think that's a what they call a feature, not a bug, of Temple of Doom.
And speaking of, I guess, dark, we have to mention that along with this film and Gremlins, which Steven Spielberg produced, it's
Yeah.
the reason we got the PG-13 rating.
Yes, very famously introduced. I don't remember what the first movie that actually was branded with PG-13
I
is, but
believe it was Down and Out in Beverly Hills.
okay, that
Yeah,
makes sense. But certainly inspired by the two movies that you listed.
yeah, and then of course, both were those were 1984. 1985, another big year. We mentioned The Goonies a little bit, which was sort of the intended to be the big Spielberg film that year, although a little sort of sci-fi romantic comedy by 1941 screenwriter Robert Zemeckis was also released that year, and it was called Back to the Future, which ended up being the highest grossing film of 1985. So that was the film that then ended up being the Spielberg film that year. And I mean, you want to add any more about those two films?
Yeah, I'll say that when I was I'll say a young teenager, like ages 12 to 14, there were the holy trilogy of trilogies to me. There was the Star Wars trilogy, the Indiana Jones trilogy, and the Back to the Future trilogy. Those were the three franchises that I loved more than anything. Really, that's where I spent most of my time consuming and talking about, were those three things. If I could have anything in the world, if I could make a wish and be granted any material object in the world, it would be a DeLorean, because of my love of Back to the Future. And in fact, for the first time ever, I recently visited you may have seen me tweet about it. I visited the mall, the Puente Hills Mall from Back to the Future, where they shot the opening time travel scene with the DeLorean. And it's not far from where I live. It's like 45 minutes from where I live. So I should have gone there earlier, but it was so cool that, we went there at nighttime, and you could really, we were looking at our phones, lining up where all the shots were and stuff. So that's a cool pilgrimage to make in Southern California if you're a fan of Back to the Future like I am.
Yeah, the Puente Hills Mall, aka the Twin Pine / Lone Pine
Yeah.
Mall, was actually my local mall for about a year.
Really?
Yeah, I lived there and didn't really even realize that until, oh, that's the mall. That's
Yeah.
the mall. And fun fact, every October 26th at 1:15, if you're willing to stay up late, a lot of fans get together and, dress up as Marty and Doc. That's probably one of my favorite memories of that film. I mean, because like you said, yeah, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, Star Wars. I mean, I'm pretty much with you there. Childhood memories right there. The
Yeah.
three holy trilogies, seen them over and over again. I mean, what's there more to say? I mean, yeah, they're just classics. I mean, I could go on about memories, but those ones just stand out in my brain.
Yeah, me too.
And with Goonies and Back to the Future, I will just say this, films kind of in a dire state in 2022, in the 2020s, but the one really big sort of highlight of 2020 as a film and decade is the amount of work that both Christopher Lloyd and Ke-Huy Quan have gotten. Both are sort of in a career renaissance, and I couldn't be.
I saw Christopher Lloyd in Nobody.
Yeah, Nobody.
Bob Odenkirk film. Has he done anything since then?
Oh yeah, well it's like everything, he's announcing a new project like every week it seems. He's gonna be in a season 3 of a show called The Mandalorian.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. I forgot he's in Mandalorian this year.
Yeah,
that's
there's
right.
a new Legion M movie sort of thing like that. Yeah, Christopher Lloyd is quite active, and Ke-Huy Quan, recently got a Golden Globe nomination for Everything Everywhere All at Once, which Harrison Ford infamously tweeted a little picture, or they got a little meet and greet at the D23 Expo.
I loved seeing that reunion between those two, but based on him saying, "Oh, I hadn't seen him in 3 decades or whatever," to me, I guess it would have been 40 years. I guess it means that Short Round is not in Indiana Jones 5, which I was a little disappointed by.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
To go on, 1985 also saw the release of in Spielberg's own words, his first grown-up movie, The Color Purple. Do you have any thoughts on The Color Purple?
Saw it once. I thought it was fine. I don't have too many memories of it. I think, it's an important film culturally, but it's not the kind of popcorn entertainment that we expect from Spielberg. I guess we could say that it's more of a quote unquote important film that didn't speak to me personally, and that's probably why I never revisited it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have similar tastes. We like the popcorn stuff, as you can
Yeah.
probably tell, listeners. I just remember seeing the intro on television, and where she gives like childbirth, and my sister was like going, "Is like, what movie is this?" And I was just like, "Well, it's directed by Steven Spielberg. It's something called The Color Purple." I was a kid. I just saw,
Yeah.
oh, Spielberg. So yeah, I only saw it for the first time this month because it was on Netflix. I mean, I'd seen pieces, and yeah, I'm pretty much agree. It's a good film. It is weird to see and introducing Whoopi Goldberg, and also
Hmm.
to think there was a point in time when Oprah was a nobody. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, that says a lot about Spielberg's sort of influence on the culture that, in Whoopi and Oprah were sort of introduced in this, to the world to one of his films.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it infamously got nominated for 11 Oscars, didn't win a single one, and that sort of started. Well, I guess you could say Spielberg even recorded himself being disappointed Jaws didn't give him a best
Yes.
director. So he's been a theme sort of throughout the 70s to early 90s, for those who can't remember, was that Spielberg was always chasing that Oscar. He was embraced by the masses, but he always sort of yearned too for the critical consensus. And you could say that with his next film too, Empire of the Sun, this is more in Spielberg's wheelhouse because it's a
Yeah.
coming of age film, but it's also, you could say, trying to go for that Oscar sort of thing. Do you like this film? What do you think about this film compared to The Color Purple?
So this movie, like you said, it's a little bit more in Spielberg's wheelhouse. It's also a little bit more memorable to me. I think I've seen it probably twice. And it's famously stars Christian Bale as a young kid. It's got John Malkovich in it as well, so it's a good cast. And I just remember little bits and pieces of it. I remember Christian Bale's character seeing the plane flying through the sky and yelling, "P-51 Mustang, Cadillac of the skies." But yeah, I do like this movie. I remember him watching the atomic bomb go off in Hiroshima from a distance and stuff. So it's got a lot of memorable scenes and shots. But I haven't seen it in a couple decades. I would like to revisit this movie and The Color Purple. I would actually like to see that again as well and see what I think of it as an adult, because I watched it when I was 15 or something. So probably wasn't the right age. So I would like to go through probably the movies that I haven't seen that often and see what I think of them as a 42-year-old, 43 now.
Well, I mean, you didn't have to give your age, but you can do the math. But
Yeah.
anyway, but yeah, I agree. I mean, Empire of the Sun, I like the film a lot. I mean, I had a teacher who once claimed Christian Bale's performance was the best performance he ever saw. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's a good child performance. You could tell Christian Bale would have a future. And
Yeah.
yeah, the movie's really good. It's sort of an underrated Spielberg film.
Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah, and then so after that, he also, I guess, produced Inner Space in the same year. Followed that year, he produced a little movie called Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is
Hmm.
kind of the basis of my podcast. I mean, so that's how much I care for the film. You have any thoughts, Mike? Because you do write for Disney, so this was sort of Spielberg's big sort of collaboration with Disney, because he has said Disney is a big influence on his life. And so this was sort of his first attempt at a Disney movie, which is a Robert Zemeckis film. But again, that film really got made because of Spielberg's involvement.
I think Roger Rabbit is brilliant. And this came out when I was, what was the year? 88?
88.
I was 8 years old. It was right up my alley at that age because I loved cartoons and I was getting into, Back to the Future. Was a combination of Zemeckis and Spielberg. So this is from the same producer and director team, and I think I was aware of that even at that age, which seems crazy. But love Roger Rabbit. Seen it a whole bunch growing up, and have it. I bought it on DVD. I've revisited it a bunch as an adult as well, and I think it really holds up well. This is one of those movies that I don't think anyone would have anything bad to say about it, right?
Yeah, I it's one of the rare movies I never get tired of talking about.
Yeah.
Never get tired of watching. I mean, but yeah, I mean that was a huge hit. I mean, I wish, he would go on to create more, but I've gone into detail about the whole relationship with Disney and then Katzenberg, and it's boring stuff. We could go on about that. That was 1988, and then he closes in 1989, a pretty big year for Spielberg. He closed out the 80s, the decade where he really thrived, with 3 films. He produced Back to the Future Part 2. He completed the Indiana Jones trilogy with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which you've also talked about on Who's the Bosk.
And I've got the Holy Grail up here too.
Yeah. A film I loved, I don't love as much. I mean, I mentioned Tarantino. I did, one of my biggest laughs this year was on the podcast. He actually compared Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade to Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, because it's kind of a joke, one joke movie. He said, I mean, I can kind of see, like, it's basically Raiders 2.0. I mean, the reason I love Temple of Doom so much was you just don't see sequels like it. And Last Crusade is sort of what you'd expect from Raiders of the Lost Ark 2. I mean, I wish it was as I've gotten older, I wish it was less funny, but I do have those childhood memories, and
it is kind of an over.
I like it, but
it does feel a little bit like an overcorrection from Temple of Doom. Like, oh, we got to make this more lighthearted and funnier to make up for the darkness. And although Temple of Doom is very funny as well, in my opinion. I do like I do like Last Crusade quite a bit, but not my favorite Indiana Jones. I would probably put it at number 3, actually.
I mean, I like the film. I mean, I've sort of grown up a little bit of it, but and then he followed. He actually made the last film of the 80s. I found out was this film and Tango and Cash, the film with Stallone and Kurt Russell, were sort of the last films ever, Hollywood films, to be released in the 80s. It was Always from 1989. So along with 1941 is often lumped there at the bottom with Spielberg's worst film. I only saw it all the way through last night, and it was all right. I mean, have any thoughts on Always?
This is another one that I've only seen once, and I saw it, I think, pretty soon after it came out. I want to say I saw it when it came out on VHS, probably like in 1990. I watched it, and don't have a ton of. I know it's a remake of a movie called A Guy Named Joe, and is it about him coming back from the afterlife or something?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we get
got Richard Dreyfuss,
an old Audrey Hepburn, which is weird to say. That's like sort of an oxymoron, old and Audrey Hepburn. But it's it was interesting. But I can see why people don't like it. It's got sort of that trademark Spielberg cheese, and the old film, like I've not seen it, but apparently it was set in World War II. This one he remade as Firefighters, which is kind of it's a choice, I'll say that. And I mean, I don't really want to spend the rest of the podcast talking about Always. So it's like, it was all right. And I can kind of sort of see why it's towards the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to the 90s, which, I mean, I should, you mentioned Tiny Toons Adventure. I know due to the success of Roger Rabbit, he made Tiny Toons Adventures. He made Animaniacs. I could probably go on about the collaboration he did with Don Bluth. But Spielberg has always loved animation. And so he kept busy during that time. Do you have any thoughts you want to share on that?
I was the right age when these came out. I really liked Tiny Toons. I really liked Animaniacs. It's not one of those things that has stayed with me as an adult. As you can tell by the wall behind me, the shelf behind me, a lot of the stuff I was into as a child stuck with me as an adult. The Tiny Toons and Animaniacs stuff
Well,
I
that
think
would
it was
probably be more your teen years. So
yeah, that's true. It was one of those things I would watch after school because it was on in the afternoon when I got home from school, but it didn't really hasn't made an impression on me as an adult.
yeah, well, I mean, Spielberg, I think we mentioned, was a huge Disney fan. One of their iconic movies is Peter Pan, which of course Spielberg would try to tackle with his next film, Hook, released
Yeah.
in 1991. It did not get really good reviews at the time, but if you go on the internet, you will not find a shortage of nostalgia for this film.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think of Hook?
I'm kind of conflicted about Hook because again, I was kind of the right age. I was 11, still technically a kid when that came out. Saw it in the theater, loved it, and then as I started to get older, I really started to see the flaws in that movie. I don't know how I would feel. Again, I haven't seen it in a while. I don't know how I would feel if I went back and watched it now. I remember though the last time I saw it, I was probably in my 20s, and I remember thinking, okay, the parts of this movie that really work are Dustin Hoffman as Captain Hook and Bob Hoskins as Smee. Like their relationship, their back and forth is really funny and entertaining. Some of the stuff with the Lost Boys is just overly cheesy, I think. And then like the real world stuff in England is pretty good too, I think, from my memory.
Yeah, well, I saw it on TV 2004, liked it, enjoyed, I thought, oh, this is a cool little movie. I don't think I really followed like critical consensus to the extent I do now, but I rewatched it in 2014, like not long after Robin Williams passed. I was going through his stuff. And Hook is pretty bad. I mean, I'm sorry, kids. I'm sorry, 90s kids. I mean, I'm one of you too, but it doesn't hold up. I'm sorry, folks. I mean, I agree with you. Dustin Hoffman, Bob Hoskins, Bob Hoskins, star of Roger Rabbit. It's great to see him, but I don't like. I kind of agree with Siskel and Ebert's sort of take on it. It's just sappy. It doesn't utilize Neverland that well. Like even the John Williams score, like yeah, like the score itself is good, but like that main theme that's like the highlight, it doesn't ever utilize it properly in the
Mm,
movie. It just the Neverland looks like bad movie sets. The Lost Boys are annoying. Like I think it would have been better either if Spielberg just made a straight Peter Pan, or if he went all the way in like the other direction and he made like an Oh Brother Where Art Thou, where it's kind of like Peter Pan, but it's in the real world. Like
huh,
maybe Hook could be a capitalist and like Peter Pan could be a union laborer or something, and the Lost Boys are the workers.
uh-huh.
I'm just throwing out ideas like it needed a bigger gimmick than what if Peter Pan grew up, because that kind of defeats the purpose of the story, I think.
It's funny you mentioned the score because every time I hear John Williams' Harry Potter music, like we saw John Williams at the Hollywood Bowl this past summer, every time I hear him play the Harry Potter theme, I think, oh, this reminds me of Hook. It does feel like he's kind of cannibalizing his own score from Hook for the Harry Potter music. I don't know why that
Yeah, I
feels
mean
that way
that
to me.
main theme from Hook is really good. Like I hear it in trailers from time to time, but it's just not even used in the movie. I don't know. Like even Spielberg, I distance himself from it because it got such a backlash, but
Yeah.
not as much now, but it's a bad one. Like I rank it down there with 1941
Okay.
personally. But even though 91 was not the best year for Spielberg, I don't think any filmmaker, maybe any person, has had a better year than Steven Spielberg had in 1993, because he had both the highest grossing movie, the biggest blockbuster of the year, maybe of the well, I mean, one of the contenders for the decade, one of the biggest for his career, Jurassic Park. It set broke the record, highest grossing movie up to a certain point, Jurassic Park. And he did the most beloved, critically acclaimed art house movie of the same year, Schindler's List. This is the Holocaust documentary that everyone sees. Like a lot of people don't like talking about the Holocaust, but like everybody like tries to see Schindler's List, like, and is communicates. Obviously, it's won Best Picture. It won a ton of Oscars. I mean, it started the Shoah Foundation. it's to have like that year where he had like he entertained everybody in one movie as well as making the art house film to see. I mean, got a hand,
Yeah,
you see why Spielberg's the legend.
that's called a comeback story, right? It feels like the pattern that we're seeing in going through his filmography like this is that every time he stumbles, he corrects himself pretty quickly and proves himself as a capable filmmaker again, both critically and financially, like you mentioned. But yeah, this Jurassic Park, I was 13 years old when I found out he was making this movie. I went out and bought the novel, Michael Crichton novel, and read it and was ready. I was like ready because this is the age where I was super, super into Steven Spielberg and loved Jurassic Park. It's I wouldn't put it in my top 5 Spielbergs right now, but I think, this movie, you can't argue against Jurassic Park. It's such a great example of this kind of visual effects, spectacular filmmaking, and it caused this VFX revolution with the CGI creatures that didn't really find itself for a couple decades. Like I really blamed Jurassic Park for a long time for ushering in this age of CGI that never worked for me until very recently. Like I feel like now we're starting just now in the last like 5 years, we're getting to the point where CGI is believable to me. But it took decades after Jurassic Park, and Jurassic Park did it right because they combined CGI and practical, animatronics, the Stan Winston puppets that he built. Oh gosh, what a perfect execution of visual effects in that movie. Yeah, wonderful film. And Schindler's List, again, it's not a popcorn movie. I saw it in the theater when I was 13. Very serious film. I've seen it, I think, a couple times since then. I definitely recognize what an amazing achievement it is as a movie. But it's not the kind of popcorn movie that I watch again and again. So I think it's very, very well made, but not among my favorites.
Yeah, well, yeah, Schindler's List, it's not a film you would necessarily watch over and over again.
Yeah.
It's not a film you would get your Schindler's List pajamas to wear and watch. But Jurassic Park, it depends how old you are, probably, like a lot of, which Spielberg you grew up with the most. But like now that the 90 kids are all grown up and they're very active and starting to get influential, you're seeing a lot more. Jurassic Park is the best Spielberg film. It recently run a Rotten Tomatoes, like sort of mashup where it was a sort of vote bracket and Jurassic Park won. It beat out Jaws, which I attribute to that. Again, a lot of kids are just grown up and nostalgic for it, and those Jurassic World movies probably help keep it in the public conscious.
Nothing like a string of inferior sequels to make the original look way better.
Yeah,
by comparison.
But yeah, I agree with you. I don't put it up there with Raiders or Jaws or even Duel, or even E.T. Like it's not one of my favorites, but there's a lot to love. With the exception of that dinosaur stampede scene, all the CGI works.
Yeah.
And that was 93. How do you top that? And Spielberg tried to top that. Apparently, the word was he tried to get Michael Crichton to write a sequel. Like Michael Crichton didn't really want to write a sequel to Jurassic Park, but that movie made so much money, he convinced Michael Crichton to write a Jurassic Park 2, Jurassic Park: The Lost World, and he released Amistad. So it's almost like him trying to recapture that Park Schindler's List sort of thing. And neither film really quite works. I just remember seeing The Lost World, Jurassic Park at like my godparents' house. Like I was like bored and had nothing to do. I was like, oh, they have The Lost World. I saw it was on VHS. I was like, I was so excited to see this. And watching that, I made an important discovery. You can make dinosaurs boring.
Right. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned this parallel between 93 and 97 because that is very, very accurate. I remember being kind of equally, if not more, excited for the sequel to Jurassic Park and then walking out of it feeling kind of deflated. And then Amistad, actually, I was probably a better age because I was 17 than versus 13. I was a better age to appreciate Amistad when I saw that in the theater. So I have fonder recollections of that kind of movie going experience. But I bet if I watched Schindler's List and Amistad back to back today, I bet I would prefer Schindler's List.
Well, I saw Amistad for the first time like within this week. I have to confess, it was a movie I had to catch up with, and it's pretty good. I mean,
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
not I can see why it's not, it's not one of Spielberg's best films, but it is a really important story. I think he would. It's probably would make a good double feature with Lincoln, which we could discuss briefly later on. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean Jurassic World is, or The Lost World, Jurassic Park is the big disappointment for me. But yeah, I mean, Spielberg, if you don't include the Indiana Jones films, which again is that Lucas Spielberg collaboration, there's a reason Spielberg tends to avoid sequels, at least as far as directing goes.
Yeah. Jurassic World has some stuff that works for me. I will say there are scenes in that movie that I think are really well executed, but as a whole, it just doesn't quite congeal. And I think the Jurassic Park franchise has definitely proved the law of diminishing returns as
Oh,
it's gone.
Jurassic Park is one good movie.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't we don't need to trash on the Jurassic Park franchise, but yeah, I think like Jaws and Duel, like it's a simple idea that was perfectly executed.
Yeah.
First Jurassic Park. But yeah, while he didn't quite capture Schindler's List with Amistad, his next film, Saving Private Ryan, very much did. It won Spielberg a second Oscar for Best Directing, which was the Oscar he was chasing for so long. He won it with Schindler's List, and he won it again for Saving Private Ryan. For a lot of people, Schindler's List was the definitive Holocaust movie. For a lot of people, Saving Private Ryan was the definitive World War II movie. I mean, it was sort of a very bitter. It did not win Best Picture. It was sort of a very bitter Oscar campaign between that and Shakespeare in Love, which was one of Harvey Weinstein's big projects. But he ultimately won out. But Saving Private Ryan seems to be the iconic film that everyone remembers. Like, it's been parodied in everything from South Park to Sausage Party, that opening scene in Omaha Beach. I mean, it's stuff of icon. I mean, you have any thoughts on Saving Private Ryan?
So I will preface this by saying that movies that are about real world wars are probably my least favorite genre of film, and the one that the genre that I have the least amount of interest in. But when I saw Saving Private Ryan, I've seen it a few times, I did think it was really, really well made and really entertaining and really moving as well. But just because it's a war, I think I don't know why I have this response to war films where I'm more of an escapist kind of guy, and it feels a little too real for me. So Star Wars are more appealing to me than real wars. For that reason, I find myself shying away from that kind of film, but I do think Saving Private Ryan is a really good example of a movie about a real world war.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's probably not even my favorite war movie of 1998. It came out the same year, The Thin Red Line.
Red Line, yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a film I'm sort of more intrigued by. Saving Private Ryan's good. I mean, it does arguably open up that trend where there's a point where the movie ends and it shouldn't. Like the book ends with the old man just dip into too much Spielberg sentimentality for my taste. But
okay,
a lot of people do like it, and it's art. It's
and it gave us Jeremy Davies, who's a really interesting actor who I find very fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's on AFI's top 100. They added it for the 2007 version. But yeah, so Spielberg would not make another movie for 3 years. He might have been busy with school because he actually did go back to school at one point. But anyway, he actually one of the filmmakers he had a good contact with was Stanley Kubrick, who he talks about having a good relationship ever since he filmed the Well of the Soul scene on the same stages of the Overlooked Hotel. That would be the basis for another movie, but before that, Kubrick had this idea to make based on Brian Aldiss's book Super Toys Last All Summer Long. He wanted Spielberg to produce. Spielberg wanted Kubrick to direct because he was a Kubrick fan. I mean, and Kubrick ended up passing away in 1999. So Spielberg put every sort of project he had on the shelf, which, he was running. We should have probably mentioned he's running a whole studio at this point, DreamWorks. He founded an entire movie studio, but at this point, he sort of put everything to make this film for Stanley. It's a really interesting film, AI, artificial intelligence. Do you have memories of this film?
I feel like I could talk about this movie at great length because I had one of the most interesting movie-going experiences in my life seeing AI, artificial intelligence. I was living in LA by this point. I was going to college at USC, and we went to what was called Man's Chinese Theater at that point, and on opening night, I think it was the midnight opening night show. And when I got in line to buy my ticket, in front of me in line was Quentin Tarantino.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what the heck? And I chatted with him in line, and I was like, oh, God, I'm such a big fan. And just from that point on, it was a really memorable evening. Like, just knowing that he was like there watching the movie with me was very cool at the beginning. And then, like, I've never, completely sold out Man's Chinese Theater. All however many hundreds of seats are in there, completely sold out, and the audience is with the movie and rooting for the movie. And I've never seen an audience turn on a movie in the last third like I did in AI. Like, I feel like everybody was on board with that movie until the third act of the film, and then it became like literal booze by the end of that film. I honestly think if that movie had ended with, the movie, I'm sure you know the movie pretty well, right? There's the part
he's underwater.
Yeah. End the movie where Haley Joel Osment is underwater. He gets trapped by that Ferris wheel. It's very Kubrickian. It's very dark. It's not hopeful in a Spielberg way at all. But what a perfect ending that would have been. Because the movie's about hope, and he has the hope, but it doesn't pay off. Yeah, wow. I think this movie can be and should be analyzed as to why it doesn't ultimately work, but I think there's a lot in it that does work. And it's another one that I would love to revisit, but I have my memories from that screening just stand out. And I actually own it on DVD. I've seen it a couple times since then, but I would like to go back and watch it now and see what I think. But yeah, that third act after he wakes up in the future and there's those weird alien hybrid, they're supposed to be robots. They're robots, but everybody in the theater thought they were aliens because they look like Close Encounters aliens when they come out of the ship at the end. So that was confusing. And then the bear taking out the tuft of hair and they clone his mom. And it's just like, what? No, these are terrible decisions. I don't know. What do you think of AI?
Well, here's the thing. In 2001, I did not see the film. It was advertised all the time. Every time you went to a movie theater, that trailer was thing. My mom wanted to see it because it starred a little kid and Spielberg kind of thing. And then my aunt who saw it said, oh, you don't want to see that film. It's dark and depressing because it does end on sort of that thing. And that when she heard that, it sort of turned her off. So I never saw AI in its original theatrical release. I didn't see it until 10 whole years later. I got the DVD for $3. Hollywood Video was going out of business. But yeah, I saw it, and to be fair, I knew about the ending because I've seen the Spielberg documentary on TCM. So I sort of knew going into it. I freaking love AI. It might be, I mean, Indiana Jones is on a whole other level, sort of that thing. Raiders, it will always be my number one.
Yeah.
AI might be Spielberg's masterpiece in my mind.
Okay,
I mean,
that's
like
interesting.
that's the thing. I see, and there is a lot of critical consensus that's turning around on that film. Like I feel like it's it's like Roger Ebert put it in his great movies list in 2011, and he didn't love it in 2001. He liked it, but sort of thing. It's one of those films. Again, I disagree with you only that it should have ended where it did because it's basically Pinocchio. It's Pinocchio, and
Yeah,
that's like saying Pinocchio should have ended when he's in Monstro. But no, it ends with him being a real boy. David sort of becomes a real boy, but it's Kubrick, so it's ironic and it's not really. And he technically dies at the end. This is the way I see it, and it's dark, it's ironic, and yeah, I think it is and I'm fascinated by films where you have multiple visions at play. So it's like, yeah, you could see, yes, Spielberg did technically direct it, but Kubrick was behind it, and I see the Kubrick vision throughout all of it. Kubrick's like one of maybe my favorite director. He was my
okay.
favorite at one point, but it's a fascinating film, and it's one I love seeing, and I think you should rewatch it.
Well, I will say, I was just about to say that this conversation is making me want to revisit it. And like I said, I liked it enough to buy it on DVD. So I have it somewhere tucked away. I'm going to dig it up and rewatch it soon because I want to see again, it's been a couple decades since that movie came out. So I
Yeah.
want to revisit and see what I think now.
Yeah, it is a fascinating film, and I love it. I put it up there with the best. But
Jude Law is so good in it.
oh yeah,
Really good performance.
and even Haley Joel Osment, he was just a kid, but
Yeah.
like apparently Kubrick wanted a real robot at one point, and I think that's a big reason he wanted Spielberg because it's like we all know how Spielberg just works with children.
Yeah.
He's kind of a child at heart, and he just can connect with the kids, and I think that's why a big reason AI works. But yeah, he followed that. It's interesting. One tidbit about AI is that during the future scenes, you can see the Twin Towers briefly in a shot
Yeah.
underwater. It came right before 9/11. So after 9/11, he released Minority Report, which is sort of an interesting film because looking back on it, you could say it sort of delves into sort of the paranoia during that whole time period. Any thoughts on Minority Report? Was this a better experience than AI?
I don't count AI as a bad experience. I want to clarify that. One of the most interesting and memorable
Yeah.
movie going experience. I wouldn't call it a bad experience, but I do think Minority Report is a fun movie. It's a fun sci-fi movie. This is based on a Philip K.
Philip
Dick.
K. Dick.
Yeah. What was the original story called? I forget. Was that Total Recall was We Can Remember It For You Wholesale,
Yeah,
but I don't remember what the title was for Minority Report. But yeah, it's just a good, fun sci-fi action movie with Tom Cruise about pre-crime. This idea of like these psychics that can see the future, and this team of cops go out and arrest people for crimes they haven't committed yet, and the morality behind that. Yeah, it's just a really interesting premise. A lot of fun action, well executed. Haven't seen it in a while again, but I do have it on DVD. Would like to revisit it too. But I remember I have fond memories of that movie.
Yeah, the source material was called The Minority Report.
Oh, it's just called okay, same
So
title
he
then, pretty
got rid
much.
of the.
Okay.
But yeah, a very fun film. Like the vision of the future was really cool and interesting at the time, but now the idea like you could like have these big touch screens. It's like now it's like we're in some ways we've sort of surpassed Minority.
Yeah. That's right. I was thinking about that recently because there's a scene where he's on like the public transportation system and people have these newspapers that are like
Yeah.
they're like video screens and they update automatically or whatever. I was like, oh, that's pretty much what we have now. The cool thing that we don't have is the personal transportation, which is like people have these little pods that they ride around in and they go on these like super highways.
Yeah, we do not have any of the cool cars. Like the cars
Yeah.
always seem hard to really adapt to the future of the movies. Don't have those flying cars from Blade Runner, etc. Another Philip K. Dick story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say that's maybe the ending, going back to the ending thing, maybe a little sappy for Philip K. Dick. Philip K. Dick's stories always work best when they end on a bit of bleakness. They can end
Yeah.
on hope, but the ending gets a little too Spielbergy schmaltz, but it's still a good movie. I would
Yeah.
just maybe take out, I would just make a few tweaks.
Yep.
And then and it was the same year, Catch Me If You Can, which was actually the first Spielberg film I saw in theaters, believe it
Okay.
or not. Like, kind of a weird one to start, not E.T. or Indiana Jones, but yeah, really interesting film that also sort of captures that theme of parental divorce. I don't think I realized until rewatching it, like, as a teenager, like, I didn't notice it when I saw in 2002, but years later, like, oh, that mom is having an affair with the other person. Again, that's not something you pick up. A really good film, we mentioned comedy with 1941. Spielberg is better at comedy with Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a caper film and an underrated John Williams score. I mean,
Yeah.
it's more of a TV movie, maybe you could say, like, than what Spielberg normally does, but a really charming film.
Yeah, with a great cast, Christopher Walken and Leonardo DiCaprio is really good in
It
this.
introduced Amy Adams. It was her first
That's
film.
right. Amy Adams is like the candy striper in the hospital. That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, I like this movie. Really, really lighthearted caper, like you said. Very entertaining. Haven't seen it in a while. I do have it on DVD. I do want to rewatch it.
I mean, we should also bring up Tom Hanks, which, he worked with Saving Private Ryan, he worked at this film, and he worked with Spielberg again on the next film, The Terminal.
Yeah.
Another a fun movie. I haven't seen it since it came out. Not as good as Catch Me If You Can, but I like it.
I also haven't seen it since it came out. I saw it in the theater. Didn't I don't remember caring for it that much, but and I don't know. It might play better now. Yeah, I just thought it was kind of mediocre when I saw it, to my memory.
Yeah,
It's about a guy who's stranded in an airport after his home country ceases to exist while he's traveling abroad.
yeah. It's kind of interesting after 9/11, like, Spielberg made two films immediately afterward that took place in airports with Catch.
Right, that's right.
Yeah,
The funny thing about the Terminal, not funny, the dark, sad thing about Terminal is that the person who it was based on, was based on a real world person, just passed away a couple weeks ago. I saw this in the news. He became like a permanent resident of Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, France, up until recent. Like, he just lived there. Like, everybody, whenever he became like this famous. People would look for him whenever they visited Paris. They would go through the airport and try to find this guy.
like a folk hero.
Yeah, folk hero. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. We should read up on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the following next year, he would make maybe his two sort of. I could say, again, I hate to hammer the whole following up with 9/11, but he followed really sort of two interesting approaches to it with War of the Worlds. He, at one point, Spielberg said he would never make a movie about aliens that put him in a negative light.
Right,
And
because
then 9/11 happened and he made War of the Worlds.
yeah, I think that quote came out after Independence Day, Roland Emmerich's Independence Day, because he was asked about that, and he was like, "No, I would never make a movie about aliens attacking the Earth," and then he changed his mind, I guess.
Well, it just had to take one of the biggest, unexpected events in recent human history.
Yeah, I think War of the Worlds really works for me in its first half. The opening scenes are really, really great.
Yeah.
Well, and you can visit the set still to this day. It's still standing Universal Studios Hollywood on the backlot tram tour. You can drive through the crashed plane in the suburban neighborhood. Such an amazing practical set that they built for that film. There are parts near the end. There's a part where they're trapped in the basement and the little like things coming through. It's just becomes Jurassic Park again, kind of. That part didn't work for me. And then I remember not really liking the very end of the film.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big consensus. Very anticlimactic. I mean, I've given this film a chance, but you've mentioned not liking CGI. I think it also hurts that film too. It's
Mhm.
2005 era CGI. So,
Yeah.
I mean, especially now you just, that's a film I wouldn't mind seeing an update, but then it's War of the Worlds. So
It's been updated many, many times. Yeah.
yeah, it's not necessarily a film I'm yearning for more, but for a director's cut. But yeah, it was War of the World. It was a big hit. And then
Yeah.
and then Munich actually got nominated for Best Picture. So again, sort of going back to that one popcorn film for the masses and what people expect me and then what I want to do. So 2005 was another one of those years. Probably his most controversial film. Like this got a lot of controversy, I remember. I mean, I don't really have much of an attachment to Munich. I mean, you have any thoughts?
It's a really entertaining like spy. I mean, it's about kind of getting revenge for
Yeah.
this attack on the Olympics. And I think it's really well made. It's really entertaining. I I don't know. I don't pretend to know enough about world affairs to understand why it was controversial. But I only saw it once in the theater and I thought it was good. That's really all I have to say about it.
Yeah, it's a solid movie. It's probably one I need to really watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't. Either way, it's probably not gonna be up there with in your top 10 because again, we tend to like the popcorn stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, and this was actually like there was a little bit of a break from 2005 to 2008, which again he returns to Indiana Jones. This was a film I've been anticipating for my whole life because we talked about the whole Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Back to the Future trilogies. I've always yearned about seeing those films on the big screen, but I was too young. And so I felt like I missed out. And so I was wondering, will there be another Indiana Jones movie? And there was. And I was really excited for it. And, this is a film I've been anticipating for years and I like it. I don't have a problem with the film. I mean, I know you actually did a episode on your podcast
Yeah.
about it, and I thought you were fair. You actually liked it and had things about it, but you were also pointed out, yes, the movie has flaws. It was never going to be Raiders of the Lost Ark, is my
Yeah. I don't think I talked about this on my podcast, but I also associate this movie with a really tough period in my personal life where I got sick and I had to move back in with my mom and had surgery and stuff. So I think that kind of taints it with this negative light. But yeah, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it's just tough for me to revisit. I think there are parts that work in it. There are definitely things that I don't like about it. And I will say I'm really glad that this fifth and theoretically final Indiana Jones movie is coming out.
final one with Harrison Ford. Probably.
Yeah, exactly. So that we can hopefully end it on a note that more closely matches what has come before, even though it's not going to be directed by Spielberg this time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll probably do a whole video on that on Crystal Skull because there's so much to talk about. But I like the film. I'm sort of a defender. Again, I acknowledge it's not perfect, but I like the film a lot. I have the Crystal Skull. I know that.
You're one of the ones who bought that. So
it's sold out.
I know. So I want to talk about this real quick. They started selling these artifacts, as you know, at the Disney parks. I've got the headpiece of Staff of Ra, the fertility idol, the Holy Grail. There's a Sankara stone is behind me somewhere. But they also did the Crystal Skull. And I was like, well, this is like how much did it cost? It was over $300. $250. And I was like, oh my God, who's going to buy this? I just didn't realize people were that big of a fan of that movie and that they would pay that much money for the Crystal Skull. But it did sell out, to the movie's credit and to the quality of the item. It really looked very nice. And I think it lit up and stuff. But then the only one of the artifacts that hasn't sold out is the voodoo doll from Temple of Doom. Every time I go and look in that shop, it's still there. And I think it's a little overpriced. And also when I go and compare it to the prop from the film, it doesn't quite look exactly like it. The coolest thing that it does come with is the feather, this really ornate feather that the kid uses to stab the voodoo doll in the movie. And that was the thing where I was like, oh, it'd be cool to have that, but the voodoo doll just doesn't look nice enough to spend the amount of money they're charging for this. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the artifacts they're selling at the parks.
I know Indiana Jones fans who pretty much say the same thing, that voodoo doll, like, it could have been better, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a whole other subject.
I'm sure they'll have the Dial of Destiny next summer.
Yeah, I mean, it's too bad Spielberg's not returning for that, but maybe not so much, because he's said many times he's just sort of moved on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I'm liking what I'm seeing so far.
Me too.
And that's all we really have to say about Dial of Destiny. And then he would take a little bit of a break for, you know, still as producer. Again, he's running DreamWorks, which interestingly in 2009 starts a relationship with Disney around this sort of time. You know, he ends up being a producer. Disney starts to produce films. One of the films he does that, you know, I've sort of hinted that there is some backlash with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. A number of those critics of those movies have said that Tintin is what I thought Indy 4 should have been. A lot of people really like The Adventures of Tintin, which Spielberg, he didn't know about it when he made Raiders, but he said that once Raiders came out, a lot of people came up to him and said, "Oh, this is like Tintin," and he's like, "I have no idea what you mean." And then he discovered it, and I guess sort of fell for the stories and decided to make a movie. This was around the time Avatar came out. You know, motion capture was huge, and I believe he produced this film with Peter Jackson, so he was sort of looking to jump into that Peter Jackson, that sort of motion capture world. I mean, he's buddies with Zemeckis and James Cameron and a bunch of, you know, he's Steven Spielberg, any big filmmaker he's talked to. But yeah, he's, in a way, you could say this is his first animated film. And since, you know, Roger Rabbit is sort of what I usually talk about, I mean, it's kind of interesting that here's an animated film he's directing. And from what I understand, Mike, you saw it for the first time this week. What did you think?
Yes, so I will say that this was the first Spielberg movie that I did not see in the theater since I think I was 10 years old, because I was still going through that period where I was had some illness in my life. And I missed it in the theatrical run, and I just never caught up for whatever reason. So I did finally watch it last week, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. It's very silly. It's got a lot of silly humor in it, but I think it works. It's very entertaining. It goes by very quickly. It moves along at a super quick pace. I will say that about Tintin. And it's got fun characters. It's a fun Indiana Jones-esque adventure about that kind of, you know, fortune hunting kind of stuff. And yeah, I think it works. I think I would call it like minor Spielberg, but I enjoyed it. I liked it for the most part.
Similar story. Didn't see it in theaters. Saw it in Netflix when it came out, so like about a year after. And my attitude was, yeah, it was all right. And then I sort of forget about it. Like it's perfectly fine, but it is minor Spielberg. Really
well choreographed action scenes is what I would say. Like kind of like Rube Goldbergian action scenes, especially that big climactic chase through the city streets. It's like, oh, this is really well thought out and executed. So pretty clever in that way.
Sort of a minor point, but I do want to bring it up since it is motion capture. I wish they followed the comics and gave him black eyes, because it does have that motion capture eyes thing, which I know bothers some people more than others. I'm not, but it's still, I don't love the film, and that might be a reason why.
There's that funny moment, actually, the moment where they introduced Tintin, where he's getting his caricature drawn by a street artist, and then he holds up the result, and it's his original look from the comics. I thought that was a funny way to introduce the character into the film.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So Tintin, kind of a minor film. I haven't yet met anyone who's passionate about it, but apparently it's a huge deal in Europe, which is intrigues me. Like apparently it got like Time magazine cover in everywhere around the world except for the United States, because Americans are just so unfamiliar with Tintin as a source.
Yeah, I honestly didn't know much about the character going in, so I didn't have that attachment to it.
Yeah, and it's the same year he did War Horse, which got nominated for Best Picture. Again, Best Picture sort of got expanded, but still, it's kind of a fun little film. It's based on a play. It's a really fun little Spielberg film. It's very sentimental. If you like animals, it may make you cry, but yeah, it's a really interesting sort of first film that Spielberg has made while being it's a DreamWorks film again that Touchstone sort of distributed, Disney sort of distributed. Yeah, I like this film. It's actually a cool little film. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I saw this. I did see this in the theater. I liked it. It does feel, I would call it minor Spielberg again, just because it does feel like a play. It feels very contained, I guess is the word, or restrained by its only one location, pretty much
You
like a
could almost
play.
see the arch in this film, Hitchcock.
That's true. Yeah, you get the proscenium is definitely there. But yeah, I don't have much of a memory of this movie. I remember thinking it was pretty good.
It's a pretty good film. Yeah, but probably maybe the most critically acclaimed film for sure he's made would be the following year at this decade, the 2010s, would be Lincoln. This
Yeah,
I remember looking at Spielberg's resume and like for years and years, Untitled Abraham Lincoln Project was always a film Spielberg was working on. Like I think
yeah,
he's been working at that since like the 90s. Like
yeah. And Liam Neeson was going to play Lincoln.
yeah, that didn't work out. He went with Daniel Day-Lewis, which a little disappointing because I'm an American and American should be Lincoln, but Daniel Day-Lewis they got who is a great but very selective actor. He does not act a whole lot, but when he acts, he brings it his all, and he actually won his third Oscar for this film following There Will Be Blood. It's a great performance of Lincoln. And Lincoln, I mentioned Amistad, I think go hand in hand together. Lincoln's a better film because it's a much more bigger event in history, them passing the 13th Amendment, getting rid of slavery. I noticed in the documentaries they pointed out it's kind of interesting. It's called Lincoln when
Yeah,
it's more about the House of Representatives. It's more
yeah,
about Congress than it is about Lincoln himself. But having a biopic is always kind of a mess anyway, and that it's always. I think it's more intriguing to base it on one specific moment of
yep.
a famous person's life. And I think that's why Lincoln works. It's a really good film, very well made, well crafted. I like this film a lot. And I even remember going to the Reagan Library in 2012, no, 2013. They had sets from the movie, props from the movie. And I thought, oh, this is cool. They even had some Smithsonian like stuff from Lincoln on loan. So I got to see a pillow which had like Lincoln's like blood stains from like a
Okay.
bullet, which I associated it with that's my favorite memory of Lincoln. Have any thoughts on Lincoln?
Yeah, I like this film a lot as well. I remember my dad was really excited for it because he's a big Lincoln fan and a Civil War history buff. And then I remember him being disappointed that it wasn't the kind of biography where you would follow him throughout his whole life. But I agree with you. I prefer biopics where it's kind of zooming in on one event in that person's life and giving you an idea of what they were like based on this one key event. Like Capote is another good example with Philip Seymour Hoffman. But yeah, really successful, I think, in showcasing Lincoln's personality through the passing of the 13th Amendment, like you said. Great cast again as well. I really like Daniel Day-Lewis. Boy, I think he's retired. I think he said now he's not doing anything else after the Phantom Thread, the P.T. Anderson film. He's really good in that, and There Will Be Blood, of course. And
I
this,
think he
yeah,
retired after Gangs of New York, so
yeah,
there's always the chance, but he
right.
is very selective, and he's I think 65 at this point, so
Okay,
he's getting up there. And but still, what a career, what a resume. I mean,
yeah,
Lincoln's a highlight.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's another one that I want to revisit because I think I only saw it once in the theater, but I remember really liking it.
yeah. I think I have like an award screener DVD that I'm technically not supposed to have,
Okay.
but someone gave to me, and I was like, sure, I'll take it. It's
As
Lincoln.
long as you don't distribute it, I think you're okay.
Yeah, but yeah, he would follow Lincoln with another 3-year gap. This time with Bridges of Spies, which interestingly, we haven't talked a lot about John Williams, who's a very key role guy in making these films. I think. I
Yeah.
can't imagine Spielberg without John Williams. At this point, this is only the second film that John Williams did not like. He did not compose The Color Purple. That
Right.
was sort of Quincy Jones's big passion project. He talked Spielberg into doing. He did the score for that. And Bridges of Spies, John Williams did not do either. He had a bit of a health problem at the time. So he was very selective of what he did. He decided to do that seventh installment of that space opera that, he chose that as priority over this. So it's got Thomas Newman, and it got nominated for Best Picture too, and it's surprising Best Supporting Actor win for Mark Rylance. I remember that being a shock. Um, a solid film, not as important as Lincoln. I think this suffers from there's a point where the movie should have ends and it doesn't. This maybe hurts. This film suffers that problem more than maybe any other Spielberg film, in my opinion. It's still good, but it's more middle of the road. I mean, you agree?
Yeah, I think solid is a good word to describe this movie. Like you used, memorable for Tom Hanks and Mark Rylance. I think there's some interesting shots. Spielberg is so good at like camera movement, I think is one of his trademarks, and I remember thinking, there's some really neat shots in this film, but other than that, not terribly memorable. And again, I've only seen it the once, but I thought it was, again, pretty good, not great.
And then, yeah, he follows that. And then he followed it the next year in 2016. He technically makes his first Disney movie, which is almost surprising. I mean, technically, again, Roger Rabbit, but he only produced Roger Rabbit. This time he made the BFG, which was based on a classic Roald Dahl book. I remember being sort of excited because I actually did a book report on the BFG when I was in 5th grade. So it's like, oh wow, Spielberg just he knows my life sort of thing. So sort of synced up with his interest. It was the last film written by Melissa Matheson, who passed away around the same time. I I sort of know you have a little bit to talk about this, so you have anything to talk about?
Yeah, this movie has a special place in my heart because, we've gotten to the point in my life where I was already a entertainment journalist, and for the press junket for the BFG, which because it was a Disney release, I got to sit at a table next to Steven Spielberg for like 20 minutes during a roundtable interview and got to ask him a question. I actually asked him about John Williams and his current back and forth working relationship with him now that they've had such a long and established career together. And I have the audio of that somewhere, and it's just this really treasured moment in my life that I got to be in his presence. Really was such an honor. And then the film I thought was, again, pretty good. It was a little overlong, I thought, but entertaining and goofy fun, kind of silly fun in the same kind of way as Tintin, but it's not an action movie. This is more of like a warm family dramedy, I guess, again, but a fine film, an okay film.
Yeah, my memory of this is not as good as yours because I was supposed to go to that exact same press junket and
Oh
my
no.
car broke down. So
I'm
I missed
sorry.
out on my chance to see Steven Spielberg in person.
I'm so sorry. Oh,
Yeah,
that's awful.
yeah, and it was actually for the same site you work for, Laughing Place. So that sort of was the end
Oh,
of my career for laughingplace.com.
I'm so I had no idea about any of this. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's okay. I mean, the good news is I guess as this movie his recent movie point out, his father lived to be 103 and his mother lived to be 97. So if genetics are any indication, we have 25 more years left of Spielberg. So there's another opportunity to meet him.
There we go. Yeah, I'm sure you will get the
I mean,
chance.
maybe, I'm hoping there's a chance I'll be able to get to that premiere of Dial of Destiny because he'll be there as executive producer. And
There
I
you
don't
go.
need to really talk to him, just be in the same, say, hey, Steve, and that's it.
There you go. I am sorry. I feel terrible that happened.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it just happened.
Yeah.
It's kind of a funny memory looking back. That's like, oh yeah, my car broke down and I didn't get to meet him. But
Uh,
I mean, it was just a quick question though, right?
yeah. I only got to ask him one question. It was like sitting at a table with probably more than a dozen other reporters, so everybody got to ask one question of him, basically.
I probably just would have asked him like, what was it like working with the late Melissa Matheson? And I know
Yeah,
he's answered that on other things. So
yeah,
not, but it was. I was excited for the chance, but it didn't quite work out that way. The movie was okay. I
yeah.
mean, again, I think that experience sort of overpowers the movie itself.
Oh, definitely for me, yes, I would say so.
And then the next year he would make The Post. Have any thoughts on The Post?
I actually really like The Post. That was another memorable movie going experience, not because Quentin Tarantino was in the theater with me or the audience reaction or anything, just because I don't know, for whatever reason that movie tapped into my adult brain. What I like to see in movies as an adult, I guess. I just loved the performances of Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, and it has both Bob Odenkirk and David Cross from Mr. Show, one of my favorite TV shows ever, as like supporting characters in there, and
Jesse Plemons is in it, I think.
Yeah, just a really great like
Breaking Bad reunion too.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I don't know. I've only seen it once, but I really enjoyed seeing it in the theater, and I have warm memories of that. I don't even really remember the plot, but
it's basically a prequel to All the President's Men.
Yeah.
That's the way, and it's structured like All the President's Men. I mean,
right.
I remember at the time, like, people were like, oh, he's only making this because of current events kind of thing. And it's true, but it's a pretty solid film. It's like, again, not a film I want to rewatch over and over again, but I was glad to see it once in the theater.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I haven't gone back and rewatched it, but I really liked it when I saw it.
And then he followed that up with maybe one of a very interesting film that's sort of Spielberg tributing himself. He's done that a couple of times, like The Goonies is sort of a tribute to Indiana Jones, but for kids. And with Ready Player One, he goes all the way. I think you have some thoughts on this.
So I went to San Diego Comic-Con and this is probably 2016 or something, and I was handed a free copy of the novel Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. And somebody had recommended it to me and said, oh, this is right up your alley. You'll love it. And I read it, and I think I literally threw the book across the room in anger multiple times while I was reading it, but I finished it. And I did not care for Ready Player One. I felt it was like pandering and poorly written. And yeah, just one of my least favorite books I've ever read. And then when I found out Spielberg was making the movie, I was like, oh God, this is not going to go well for anybody.
But you have to see it because Steven Spielberg is making it.
Yeah, I saw it. Went to the theater, saw it. Didn't care for the movie either. I know they changed a lot from the book. It's a very different movie, I would say, than the novel. And I didn't like the new stuff that they added or changed either. The whole sequence going into The Shining was really bizarre, and just landed with a thud from me. Although I really like Ben Mendelsohn, I will say, as an actor. I think he's great in Rogue One. He's great in the Marvel stuff.
What about Mark Rylance? I mean, he's back from Bridges of Spies. sort of Spielberg's new alter ego, it seems like.
Yeah, I don't know. He's fine, I guess, in Ready Player One. Not a movie I think about very often.
Probably about our biggest disagreement since
Yeah.
I mean, I saw this thing 3 times in theaters.
Wow.
I mean,
Okay.
I love the film. I call it a flawed masterpiece. Like
Wow.
it's not a perfect, like I acknowledge it's got faults. I've heard a lot of them, and I agree with like the problem, like the message of put your phone down and enjoy life maybe rings hollow when it's referencing other movies for the entire movie. Like, yeah, that's sort
Yeah.
of a contradiction. But I don't know. I love I like the vision of the future. I like, arguably, you could say it's commenting on where we are now, but the video games are not as good as the Oasis. I was just riveted. It kind of reminded me of Back to the Future Part 2 a little bit, in that
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's a vision of the future that's actually optimistic. I mean, Spielberg, we attack him for being sentimental at times, some people more than others, but I like a vision of the future that's sort of optimistic. I put Spielberg in that same category as like a Walt Disney, a Gene Roddenberry, a Ray
Yeah.
Bradbury, as a futurist who, has a bit of hope in there. And like,
Sure.
yeah, I mean, I just love the world of the Oasis, watching like going by those Ready Player One art books. Like, I just want to jump into it. Like, I just want to swim in the art. Like, I like the look of this movie. And because I love Roger Rabbit too, I even like a lot of the cameos. Again, nothing as exciting as seeing Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny in the same thing, but it still has that Spielberg spectacle. And I just remember like seeing it the first time, and just that first race. Like, it's like, all the Spielberg dramas, they're fine, but Spielberg was not put on this planet to make films about the Supreme Court cases. He wasn't put on this planet to make that. He was put on this planet to make popcorn entertainment people love. And that thing, it was almost in this, like, it was like the Raiders truck chase, or like the best moments of, like, it was just an
Yeah.
adrenaline rush. So I have a lot of fond memories of
Well,
it.
maybe like AI, maybe I need to, as much as it like almost pains me to say it, but maybe I need to watch Ready Player One again.
I
And
mean,
I think I have to divorce it from the book because I really had a visceral
yeah. And
hatred
I
of
would
the.
say it is better than the book. Like,
Okay.
maybe everyone's favorite scene is that shining scene, and that's not in the book. And
It's not. Yeah.
and I feel like it's personal too, because Spielberg had that Kubrick connection. I
Yeah.
mentioned like he filmed The Well of the Souls in the Overlook Hotel on England. So it's like, it just, I really liked, I really liked Spielberg's return to his roots.
Okay.
I wish, he would do it more often.
Right.
And yeah, and then, no new movies 2019, and then 2020 happened, which was supposed to be his West Side Story year,
Yeah.
and we know how that turned out. COVID delayed it a whole year. You have any thoughts on West Side Story?
I thought it was really good. I actually got to see. I don't want to rub this in, but I got to see Spielberg in person again at a screening. He did
I
like
did
a
not
Q
get
and
to
A.
go to that screening,
I'm
so.
sorry.
But you
um,
didn't you didn't get to ask him a question or
no,
pose for a selfie. Hey.
I did not. I could have, because there were a bunch of people who did like approach him afterwards for selfies, and I was just like, I'm kind of at the point in my life where I'm like, I don't need to be a celebrity hound anymore.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I've spoken to him. I had my
But
moment
does
with
he know
Spielberg.
who you are? Like, hey,
He
Mike.
does not. No, he would absolutely never remember me in any way. But yeah, it was cool to go to that. It had the cast and Spielberg there. But yeah, the movie I thought was very well made. Again, camera movements and composition wise, just really technically jaw dropping. I thought really, and it. I will say, like going into it, you're thinking, well, West Side Story is great, because I saw West Side Story, the 60s version, in film school on the big screen in the Norris Theater on USC campus, and thought it was wonderful. Like, that's a movie where you're thinking, why does this need to be remade. But I think Spielberg did put his stamp on it. It is kind of updated for a new generation. There's like socio-political stuff in it that's added for, for modern audiences, and I think it works really well. I think it's a good companion piece actually to the original, and I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, like the BFG, West Side Story sort of matters a lot to me because I did in high school, I did marching band. We marched to West Side Story. So it's
Okay.
kind of like another, like, wow, Spielberg has another connection in that sort of weird way. Like, so it's like, yeah, I was sort of intrigued. Like, I don't love West Side Story as a movie. We did not see it in a pristine. We saw it at a crappy 4x3 TV when we were in band class, and I could sense like the class wasn't really enjoying it very much because there is sort of that camp value to West Side Story, like, oh, gangs dancing and such, which you could sort of mock. And yeah, I was sort of intrigued. Well, how is Spielberg going to adapt this to new? For a new audience for today, for modern. And I do think like thinking about like a high schooler today, like, yeah, they would probably more be drawn to this movie than that one. Like, it's not as the way he stages things, like it's not as corny as the original. Like, I don't know, like the original, it's hard to describe, but the original has a sort of camp value, whereas the Spielberg, the way he'd set up, like it just feels more natural. Like it's
Yeah.
more in New York, it's more in city. So visually, like in some ways, it was an improvement over a Best Picture winner of a movie a lot of people like. And
Yeah.
it's all right. I mean, it didn't make me fall in love with West Side Story. So in that sense, I see it's like Spielberg, you've never made a musical. Like, why are you choosing this one that's already been made and already been acclaimed? Like,
Mhm.
aren't there unfilmed musicals you can make, like Company or something? I don't know. Other
The
Sondheim.
Book of Mormon. That's not really a Spielberg joint.
That wouldn't fit. Like, there's just got to be something else. So West Side Story, I just thought it was okay, but it's not a film that means a lot to me.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, but you liked it more.
I did like it. Yeah, I had another memorable movie going experience that I enjoyed. Again, I haven't rewatched it, but
I
had
think
good
it's on
memories of
Disney
it.
Plus.
It is there, yeah,
And
whenever I need it.
it only took 2.5 hours, but we're finally to the point of today where we're now at Spielberg's own childhood. He's brought the Fablemans. This is not a film we can really talk about favorite memories because it just came out,
Yeah.
sort of thing. But what did you think of the Fablemans, and did it put your perspective on Spielberg, since we're starting to wrap things up? Did it change your perspectives on Spielberg, either the man, his work, or anything? Like, what are your thoughts and impressions?
Well, the first thing I said to my wife when we walked out of the film was, um, if this is a autobiography about his childhood, which it very much is, he hasn't denied that. Why change the name? Why call it the Fablemans and not the Spielbergs or whatever? And I guess the reason we came up with is so he wasn't beholden to telling the exact story as it was. This is a fictionalized version of his upbringing with a lot of truth in it and a lot of embellishment is the word, I think. And yeah, I really enjoyed the film. It was very interesting to see Spielberg's take on his own life, I guess, and the moments that he feels shaped him into the person that he is, and the filmmaker that he is. It's very touching. It's very sad in a lot of parts. It's very funny in a lot of parts, especially the end. Oh man, I think that last scene really sold the movie to me, because I don't know, how much do we want to spoil here?
Well, I think I revealed who got casted it. Like, I posted that news on like social media, like
Okay.
so it's like, sure, you can spoil it. I mean,
Okay.
it's not only out in theaters, you can now actually stream it. So you can buy
Okay.
it now. It got released this week. So sure, we can spoil it.
Well, I'll say, like, I wouldn't be shocked if Michelle Williams gets a acting nomination for this. Also, Judd Hirsch, supporting actor. He's only in a couple scenes, but really great and really memorable and touching performance. But then the cameo at the end is David Lynch, the filmmaker David Lynch, playing John Ford, the Western director. And I'll never, like, that scene was so hilarious and perfect. And it really just tied the movie up in a perfect bow at the end. And there's this little moment.
Oh yeah,
the little camera adjustment at the last shot. Oh boy. I just thought that was so terrific, and again sent chills up my spine, brought tears to my eye. Yeah, I think the movie works really well. I was moved by it and entertained by it.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned a few times, like in the show, like, after he did Schindler's List and it had that perfect ending, he went above and beyond with that ending with like the grave and, they all put a stone. I think after that, that's where he got a point where there was a moment where the movie should end, but it didn't. Like, it was from that moment on where he thought he needed to go above and beyond with his endings and just that. And there's a point in the end where it shouldn't. Like, that's kind of a common criticism recent Spielberg has got. The Fabelmans has the opposite problem. The ending is brilliant. It's the best thing in the whole movie. It's building up and it's great. So the ending gets a plus. I mean, and just a side note, I've never met Spielberg. I have met David Lynch.
Oh yeah.
That was a memorable.
That's awesome.
But anyway, yeah, that ending, brilliant, love it. The rest of the movie's good leading up to it. I feel like it has that home video quality where it's like the cinematic equivalent of watching your buddy or your friends or your family members' home movies, where it means a lot to Spielberg.
Yeah.
It really means a lot, but unless you're maybe a huge fan of Spielberg, we are, but even some fans like it won't mean a lot to them. Like it was good, if a little dull at times. I mean, not a bad, like, it's not a bad movie. Like, it is good. There's a lot of heart and passion. And again, but in the same way, like, you're not going to be interested in someone else's kids like doing like, a football game or like some recital as the parents are who are recording it for future memories. Like, yeah, this stuff is not going to be as moving to me or to a regular person as it is to Spielberg. It's interesting from like a psychological standpoint. And you can, again, it does help you understand, if you don't know much about the man or his past, like some of the past themes, like the lost fathers thing, the parental divorce thing, like that's sort of all revealed, and it's interesting. So it's like, yeah, it was a solid film. I've only seen it once, maybe I'll even like it even more the second time. And so far, I think it was an interesting film that put some new light into some of his films, but I wouldn't say it's the best film he's made.
Oh no, I would never say that either. It's definitely in the middle somewhere for me as well. I remember walking out again. My wife said that she had a kind of a bad taste in her mouth from the movie because it kind of felt like he was airing his family's like dirty laundry out there for everybody. And my argument was like, oh, he probably, he waited until his parents were no longer around to tell the story. Because it is very personal to see what they went through in their separation and divorce or whatever. But it is insightful to know what kind of stuff happened to shape him in his childhood in that way. And also, I think I've read some very interesting interpretations of that climactic scene after they show the beach party film, when he's having that conversation with not the bully character, but the sub bully or the jock from the high school. I mean, he asks him like, why did you show me in such a positive light in that movie? And I just recently, yesterday or the day before, read this interpretation about how that scene is about the history of the Jewish people in Hollywood. And I was like, okay, well, I didn't think about that at all. But I thought it was a really interesting take and interpretation of that, what Spielberg was trying to say. And I don't know if that moment really happened for him in his real life, or if he
I'm
said,
guessing not. Like
yeah,
not in that way. Like
right.
maybe something similar happened, but it's like it's dramatized, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think there is a lot to be read into the film. And I think people will be looking at it in that way for years to come. And I'm curious to see like what kind of awards recognition the movie gets. Because, there were some strong movies this year. I don't know. Is this going to get Best Picture? You think Fablemans will get Best Picture
It'll get
nomination?
nominated for
Yeah.
sure. Spielberg will get nominated. That's a fact. Will it win? I mean, it doesn't have that same power that Schindler's List has, which is his
Yeah.
only film that's so far won Best Picture. Yeah, again, it's sort of small and personable, but I don't know. Filmmaking is just such in a different stage than it used to be that I don't know if this will have the power to win the Oscar, but it might because 2022, I don't know, it hasn't been a great year for film. There is sort of a more divide between popcorn and, films and sort of like dramas, Oscar dramas than there's ever been, it seems like. And Spielberg's always been, again, we've talked about how he does an interesting balancing act. And
Yeah.
this one is sort of more obviously the other end, but we'll see how Oscar campaigning goes and all that.
Yeah. I think I like the Banshees of Inisherin a little bit more. This really dark comedy. Have you seen that yet?
I have not, but I do have HBO Max now, so I
Yeah.
should check it out.
I think you'd like it based on what some of the stuff you've said to me. I think it'd be up your alley.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, The Fablemans was a really good, it was a good film. I was like, interesting. So yeah, we are actually, we've gone through every film he's
Yeah.
directed.
How
Amazingly.
about that? We did them all.
I mean, it only took a couple and a half hours, but I mean, I wasn't sure how much we would talk about if we wouldn't have talked about, but I'm glad we did.
Yeah.
Before you go, just maybe some lightning round questions.
Okay.
Favorite Spielberg film?
Jaws.
The Spielberg film you've seen the most?
It might be Raiders. I think it's Raiders.
All right. Spielberg film you would most likely want to rewatch now, like right now.
Oh, well, now after this conversation, I'm going to say AI.
Yeah. Yeah. I was about to say, like, when I typed that question, like, but yeah, like, I probably inspired you.
You did. You did.
Yeah. I had some influence there. Maybe an underrated Spielberg film you'd recommend to people.
Oh, that's a really good question. Oh boy, underrated. But so like one that a lot of people haven't seen
Yeah,
or
like, as much as we all love Jaws and Raiders, everyone's seen Jaws and Raiders. Like,
right.
what's one that, you would say?
From the recent stuff, I would say The Post. I had a really warm reaction to that movie. And I don't think a lot of people have seen it. So yeah, that would be my choice.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. And finally, I guess, do you have any like final thoughts about the man, his career, and something you want to like, say before we start to wrap the show?
Yeah, Steven Spielberg has had a dramatic, like radical effect on my life. Like he's one of those people where if he didn't exist, I would be a very, very different person and in a very, very different place than I am right now. I mean, he is one of the foundational building blocks of my existence is Steven Spielberg. So it's just in my DNA at this point. And it's funny, we mentioned Bob Odenkirk earlier, and I read an interview with him recently where he talked about working with Steven Spielberg on The Post and how he was interested in watching Spielberg work as a director because Bob Odenkirk considers himself a cynic, and he was interested in watching Steven Spielberg work as an optimist, like you called him earlier. And I think those two different outlooks on life are very much part of me because I do love that cynical type of comedy that Bob Odenkirk creates, and I love the optimistic type of film that Spielberg creates as well. So those are kind of my two halves. And Spielberg is emblematic of the optimist in me, I think. That's I love his work. I love even the stuff that I haven't enjoyed. I'm glad that I saw them.
Yeah, that's a really good and insightful answer. I know, very yin and yang.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean, I agree. I mean, aside from Walt Disney and George Lucas, I don't know if there's anyone alive who's had like a bigger
Yeah,
influence or impact on my life and, certainly culture in general. Like, he's been making films, we went over a 50-year career. He's still
yeah,
going on. If you've been young since the 1970s, you've grown up with this man and his work, and we're getting to a point where like that's the majority of the planet. So it's like I can't imagine life without him. It's like
yeah.
it
I
really means a
actually,
lot.
I was thinking recently, not recently, but a few years ago, there was a year where a bunch of celebrities died, and everybody was like, "Oh, this year every celebrity died or whatever." And I was thinking the celebrity death that's going to hit me the hardest is Steven Spielberg. When like even thinking about it now, I'm tearing up. Like that is really going to affect me when that happens because he's had such a big impact on me. But hopefully not for a while.
Well, I mentioned genetics earlier. I mean, his father lived to be 103.
Yeah.
So I think for 25 more years we have him.
And I have terrible genetics, so he may actually outlive me, and maybe that'll be the gift, the last gift he gives me is that I don't have to go through Spielberg's death.
And with that, I think that really is a perfect way to
Yeah.
wrap the show, wrap my big sort of Spielberg retrospective I've been wanting to have for at least a year, if not longer. Thank you, Mike, for agreeing to do this and taking your very valuable time to talk.
No, I'm glad. When you asked me to do it, you asked me a couple months ago, and I said I'm really not available right now. But I'm glad that you waited to do this with me, and I'm glad that I got to, I found time to revisit Sugarland and watch Tintin and see Fablemans and stuff, and it's like we talked about earlier, it's got me inspired to go and revisit some of the other stuff too. So I'm really honored that you mentioned at the top that you started this podcast, or that was partially inspired by Who's the Bosk, and then also really pleased and happy that you invited me to do this. It was really a whole lot of fun, and I'm going to be checking out your other podcast episodes too, because I'm curious to see what else you've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean it's mostly interviews. Not this is the longest show I've done by far.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean for a Roger Rabbit show, I wish I could focus more on Roger Rabbit, but I like talking about other stuff, and the man who made Roger, who helped make that happen. Spielberg's worth this show.
Well, I'm going to be needing some guests in Who's the Bosk season 4 coming up, so expect an email from me. So
okay,
that's all
I will. Well, my contact. So
okay,
Mike, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Good to chat with you. Thank you.
Okay. Just a reminder to hit like and subscribe on the Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook pages for Downtown Toontown. Also check out my YouTube page. Subscribe to JJ Smith Media for more updates. And that's going to be it for today's show. Until next time, I will see you downtown.
Downtown Toontown is an unofficial podcast. It is in no way affiliated with the Walt Disney Company. The opinions expressed on this podcast are mine and mine alone and do not reflect any official member of the Walt Disney Company or the Walt Disney Company itself.